The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the usual hint of chili I'd left simmering in the slow cooker that morning. No, this was sharper floral, synthetic, like the inside of a Macy's perfume aisle. Linda only wore perfume on holidays or funerals. The second thing was her posture, not slouched in the recliner, not hovering over her crossword at the kitchen table. No, she was standing at the front door, coat on, arms stiff at her sides like she was afraid they'd betray her nerves. And then I saw them. 2 suitcases by her feet, both zipped, upright, little tags dangling like dog collars. One of them still had a Southwest baggage sticker on the side from our trip to Reno 2 years ago. That trip ended with her crying in the hotel bathroom because I hadn't noticed her new hair color. Now she was dressed like someone about to board a flight, but without the tears. I stepped inside, kicked off my boots. Didn't say a word. She turned toward me. Not startled. Almost rehearsed. "I'm leaving tonight," she said, her voice too smooth. "I've been unhappy for years." She waited. I could tell. Not because she needed to explain, but because she needed a reaction. A spark. A slam of the door. Maybe even a pathetic little "please don't go." Something that would confirm she still had power. Instead, I just said, "I see." And I did see. I saw the way her shoulders twitched, just slightly, when I didn't give her the fight. Like a dog lunging at a stranger, only to find the stranger doesn't flinch. Her face tightened, not in guilt, not in regret, but in confusion. She'd been building up to this. This whole theater piece. Linda always loved a performance. When her mother died, she bought a black hat with a veil and walked 4 steps behind the casket like she was being filmed. When our son got married, she practiced her toast in front of the mirror for 3 weeks. And now? Here she was, the final act, expecting gasps and sobs and a desperate hand on the hem of her coat. But I'd seen too much in my life to put on a show for a woman who checked out 3 years ago. I didn't say, "Is there someone else?" I already knew. I didn't ask, "Why now?" Because that would have implied I hadn't noticed the steady erosion, the way she flinched when I touched her shoulder, the new passwords on her iPad, the yoga mat that never seemed to smell like sweat. I didn't accuse. Didn't beg. Didn't reach for her. I just looked at the bags, then at her face. And for the first time in maybe a decade, I wasn't afraid of the silence between us. "You're not going to say anything?" she asked. I met her eyes. I already did. That made her blink. She shifted weight from one foot to the other, glanced at the clock, then at her phone, like maybe someone was waiting, or like she needed to prove there was a destination on the other side of this moment. But her hand was trembling. I noticed that much. Funny thing is, for all the words she'd saved up, all the justifications and emotional calculus, I could see her script was falling apart. "Eric," she said, softer now. "Don't you care?" That was the kicker. The final test. I walked past her, straight into the kitchen, took the chili off the heat, stirred it once. Then I turned and said, "You can take the casserole dish if you want. I don't plan on eating leftovers." Her mouth opened. No sound came out. I didn't care if she thought I was cold. I wasn't angry. I was awake. And I saw her for exactly what she was. A woman who mistook my silence for weakness. And tonight, she was about to learn the difference. She cleared her throat like she was trying to reset the stage. "I'll be staying at my sister's in Sedona," she said, forcing calm into her voice. "Just until things settle." Settle. A word she'd used when we had to put down our old lab, when we got audited, when our son totaled his first car. "It'll settle, Eric. Everything settles." I didn't respond. I just walked right past her and headed toward the front door. My steps were slow, deliberate, each one louder than anything she'd said all night. The click of my boots against the wood echoed like a metronome counting down to something she hadn't rehearsed for. I reached for the handle, felt the chill of the metal. Then I opened the door, not a dramatic swing, not a slam, just a steady, deliberate motion. It creaked slightly. Outside, the evening sun was dying across the pines, casting long shadows on the gravel driveway. A breeze slipped in, cool and pine-scented, and with it came the first flicker of unease in her expression. "You're free to go," I said, my voice steady as concrete. "Don't miss the highway turnoff." No sarcasm, no spite, just a man who'd stopped lying to himself and to her. She stared at me like I'd just spoken in a language she didn't recognize. Her mouth twitched. Eyes darted. She was waiting for the punchline. But I wasn't laughing. Wasn't even blinking. That sentence, those 8 plain words, landed harder than if I'd screamed, thrown her suitcase across the yard, or broken down sobbing like some beaten dog. And she knew it, because she didn't move. She just stood there, jaw clenched, blinking like someone watching the credits roll before the movie even got good. "You're really just going to let me walk out?" she asked, voice quieter now. I tilted my head slightly, as if confused by the question. Was there another option? That landed too, because she thought she'd get to choose how this ended. She'd pictured me begging, maybe offering to go to counseling to be better. She thought I'd try to hold her, guilt her, remind her of birthdays and Christmas mornings and the night we danced barefoot in the garage to a Damn Sam Cooke record. Instead, I opened the door like a maitre d' escorting a rude customer to the exit. Linda didn't know what to do with that. She reached down, gripped the handle of her nearest suitcase, but didn't lift it. Just stared at it, like maybe it had gotten heavier. "You've changed," she muttered, almost to herself. "No," I said, stepping aside to give her a clear path. "You just stopped paying attention." And that was the moment her posture broke. Shoulders slumped, only slightly, but I caught it. That subtle fracture in her performance. A split second of doubt. She looked out the door, at the empty street beyond the gravel. No headlights. No car waiting. Just the long Arizona dusk and the scent of juniper. That's when I knew the silence was mine now, not hers. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to cry. She wasn't worth it anymore. I needed her to walk through that door thinking she had won something, while every step she took was leading her straight into the fallout she'd never expected. And she would walk. She had to. Her pride wouldn't let her do anything else. But the weight of that open door, the lack of resistance, it was going to haunt her far worse than any goodbye. She took a breath like she was about to say something profound. But the only sound in the room was the wind pushing softly through the open frame, brushing past us both, carrying nothing but endings. She finally moved. Not quickly, no. Nothing about her movement was confident anymore. She reached down like her suitcase might bite her. Her hand hovered before gripping the handle, fingers tight, knuckles pale. She stood back up with it, not looking at me, just staring out the open door, like a prisoner who expected guards to rush in at any moment and drag her back. That's when I turned. Not toward her. Toward the hallway table. It's an old piece, oak, scratched to hell, one drawer that sticks in the humidity. We've had it since our first apartment in Tucson, back when furniture meant hand-me-downs and the future still had fresh paint on it. These days, the table mostly held junk mail, car keys, and a ceramic bowl Linda insisted on calling decorative. Tonight, it held something else. I picked up the envelope slowly. Not with flourish, not with emphasis. Just quiet intent. Cream-colored. No name on it. Thick. Linda froze. I held it out without a word. She glanced at it, then at me. Her face twitched. Suspicion? Curiosity? Fear? Hard to say. She didn't reach for it right away. "Something to keep you company tonight," I said. Calm. Even. Like I was handing her a crossword puzzle and a cup of tea. She hesitated. God, she hesitated. And that said everything. Because Linda was a woman who always knew. Always sure of herself. The one with the itinerary, the dinner reservation, the backup plan in her purse. But this envelope? It bent something in her. Made her small for a moment. Like maybe, for the first time in years, she'd walked into a room where I was 10 steps ahead. She took it. Carefully. The weight of it surprised her, I could tell. It wasn't heavy in the physical sense. But meaning has mass. And that envelope had plenty. She clutched it against her coat, pressed to her ribs like a fragile thing. Like it might shatter or burn. "What is it?" she asked. I didn't answer. Just met her eyes and held the silence until she looked away. Another gust of wind crept in through the open door. It carried dust. Cold. And something else. Dread. Maybe. The kind you feel when a familiar road suddenly forks into unmarked territory. She stepped outside. The envelope still tight in her hand. She paused at the top of the steps. Turned halfway like she might say something. Maybe ask again. But I was already walking back toward the kitchen. Calm. Measured. Like a man who'd spent months rehearsing this exact choreography. The door creaked closed behind her. No slam. Just a hush. And for the first time in a long, long while, the house felt like it belonged to me again. Quiet. Clean. Cold. But honest. The sun had long dropped behind the red cliffs by the time she pulled over on a gravel shoulder off Route 89. The engine ticked quietly as it cooled, echoing in the stillness of the high desert. Linda's hands sat motionless on the wheel for a good 2 minutes before she finally reached for the envelope sitting on the passenger seat. It hadn't left her lap during the entire drive. She stared at it now like it might detonate. The headlights were off, just the faint orange of the dashboard lighting her face as she peeled it open. Not in a hurry. Carefully, like whatever was inside could wound her more than she'd already allowed. Inside, a single note sat on top, typed, no signature. This isn't about anger. It's about correction. She blinked. No, I loved you once. No, how could you? Just that one line. Clinical. Final. Like something a surgeon says before slicing out a tumor. Like he wasn't trying to destroy her, just remove what had rotted. Beneath the note were 3 documents, neatly folded. She unfolded the first and felt the blood drain from her face. The second made her whisper, "What the hell?" The third, she didn't even finish before she opened her banking app with trembling fingers. No connection. Of course. The desert silence thickened around her, broken only by the sound of her pulse climbing into her ears. She reached for her hotspot, rebooted the signal, and when it connected, the chill that ran through her spine had nothing to do with the mountain air. Savings, $0. Joint, account closed. Credit card, declined. It didn't compute. She blinked, refreshed. Nothing changed. She opened the glove compartment and dug around for a napkin, something to wipe the sweat pooling above her lips. Found nothing but an old map, a flashlight, and 2 half-melted mints. Her hands moved back to the documents, the ones she thought were irrelevant when he handed them to her. But now they stared up at her like legal obituaries. The first one confirmed it. Every shared account had been closed. Not yesterday. Not today. Weeks ago. Her name scrubbed clean. The pension she once joked about redecorating with had been transferred into a trust, with Eric's nephew, Carter, listed as executor. She reached for her phone again, but her fingers felt thick, stupid. Dialed. Straight to voicemail. Again. Again. The second document looked like a business statement. She skimmed it. The motorcycle shop, his shop, the one she'd bragged to her girlfriends about helping build, was no longer in his name. Hadn't been for 6 months. The LLC had been dissolved and reformed under a different name. No mention of her anywhere. Her breathing went shallow. She flipped to the third sheet. It was more brutal than the others. She recognized her own forged signature from 3 years ago. The loan she'd taken out in his name, $48,000, for her coaching certification, the one he never once asked about. She'd convinced herself he never noticed. He had. The document was a signed waiver from Eric to the lender, accompanied by evidence and a notarized statement. He was off the hook. The debt was hers now. Entirely. Irrevocably. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Correction. Not punishment. Not vengeance. Not rage. Correction. Like he'd been watching the ship drift off course for years, and tonight he just cut the line, let it go, and watched her sail into the storm she thought she'd planned for. The envelope slipped from her hand and landed on the floor of the car. She stared at it. She thought she'd walked out in control. Instead, she drove off the edge of a cliff, and he'd packed her a map she never bothered to read. Somewhere in the dark behind her, the man she thought was still waiting to be broken was already gone. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Some glitch. Maybe the app needed to be refreshed. She flicked her thumb up, down, swiping like a woman trying to rub away a nightmare with pixels. But the numbers didn't change. No available balance, no cushion, no overdraft safety net. Just zeros staring back at her like a slap. She tapped the next account. Savings, closed. Credit card, inactive. The joint retirement account, gone. Not low, not pending, just gone. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked around the empty stretch of highway as if someone might appear and explain it all. A prank. A system update. Some kind of digital flu. But the truth wasn't in the phone. It was in the fine print of the first document she'd already tossed onto the passenger seat, half-read in her panic. She snatched it up now, her eyes finally locking in, not on the sentence about account closures, But on the date, 6 weeks ago, long before tonight, long before she stood in that living room and declared she was leaving, Eric hadn't reacted to her walking out because financially she was already gone. She skimmed the rest of the document with trembling hands. It wasn't just the accounts. The house, the ranch-style home with the rusted swing set and the hummingbird feeders she liked to refill when she felt generous, was no longer theirs. The deed had been quietly transferred into an irrevocable trust. Eric's trust. With her name scrubbed from the county records like a chalk drawing before rain. She remembered signing something. A notary. 2 signatures. Estate simplification, he called it during a calm afternoon last winter when she was still too distracted with her spiritual retreat, webinars to read past the bolded title. He brought her tea that day. She didn't ask what she was signing. She was too busy texting Lisa from Sedona about some tantric breathing coach with a wait list. She had smiled at him, signed her name, and handed back the pen. Now that one act, that careless flick of ink, meant she had walked out of a house she no longer legally had a right to walk back into. She glanced at her suitcase in the backseat, packed with handbags, yoga pants, a few books on feminine energy and breaking generational trauma. Nothing useful. No backup plan. No lease agreement. She had no place in Sedona. Her sister had been an emergency couch option at best, and Linda had always looked down on that one-bedroom condo like it was a holding pin for the emotionally bankrupt. Now she was heading straight toward it with nothing but inspirational affirmations and a suitcase full of delusions. Her lips moved but made no sound. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He didn't even flinch. Because he'd already cut the rope. And what shattered her more than the money, more than the logistics, more than the legal shell game he'd played with surgeons' hands, was the simple, quiet realization. He stopped protecting her. Eric, who used to refill her gas tank without asking. Eric, who fixed the dryer cord with duct tape when she forgot to schedule the handyman. Eric, who picked up her blood pressure pills every Tuesday like clockwork. That man had watched her walk out the door and let her do it with nothing. She looked back at the screen one more time, just to torture herself. 0, 0, 0. Linda Harper hadn't left a marriage. She'd exited a fortress, thinking she still had the keys, only to realize the locks had been changed months ago. She dug into the second document like a drowning woman grabbing at reeds. Anything. Something to prove he hadn't erased everything. The motorcycle shop that had to be safe, right? Her name wasn't on the door, sure, but she was part of it. She had opinions. She picked out the stupid vintage mugs for the break room. She bought the aloe plant that died within a week because no one watered it. She sat at the counter once a month and told the wives of Eric's clients how restoring these old bikes was their therapy. Hell, she even posted a picture of the shop on Facebook with the caption, "Our baby's growing up." So when she saw the shop's name on the second page, Iron Legacy Motorworks LLC, her heart actually skipped with relief. Until she saw the date. Dissolved, November 17th. A cold, clinical stamp. The kind that says, "This isn't yours anymore." Below that, new entity registered under Carter P. Harper. Her hands stilled. Carter. Eric's nephew. The same Carter she used to call that stoner with the lazy eye whenever he came around with oil under his fingernails and a beat-up El Camino that smelled like vape juice and stale fries. That Carter was now the registered owner of the business she swore she helped build from the ground up. She read on. The shop had been restructured 6 months ago. Different tax ID. Different registration. Eric had filed for dissolution, reassigned the equipment under a private lease agreement, and handed over day-to-day management to Carter while retaining zero formal ownership. On paper, Eric didn't own the shop. On paper, Linda never existed. She rifled through the pages, her breath stuttering. Not a single mention of her. Not even a spouse of record. She wasn't a partner, not a shareholder, not a silent investor. She was a ghost. A warm body who once hosted a Labor Day barbecue in the parking lot and thought that made her integral. There was one line, though. One casual dagger. No prior claims or community assets associated with former LLC. She blinked. Read it again. Then again. It was like finding your name in an obituary before you're dead. And here's the worst part. She remembered Carter being around more. At first, she rolled her eyes, thought maybe Eric was finally trying to teach the kids something useful. Carter had started answering the shop phone, signing for shipments, taking photos for the business website. Linda even mocked it once. What's next? Carter's face on the company mugs. Eric had just smiled. Smiled like a man who already had the knife halfway in. She leaned her head against the steering wheel and let out a short, ugly laugh. The workshop fridge, that was the only place her name had ever truly lived in that business. A bright pink sticky note, Linda's oat milk, do not touch. And even that had probably been peeled off by now. The illusion shattered cleanly, without ceremony. No explosion. Just paper. Cold, legal paper that said, you were never part of this. You just thought you were because no one corrected you. Linda used to boast to her book club that the shop was her retirement plan. Turns out, the only thing she was retiring from was the fantasy. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the final document, sensing, before even reading a word, that this one would burn the most. And it did. Right at the top. Assignment of liability and debt notification, First Freedom Credit Union. She blinked, unsure what she was even looking at first. But the name on the loan jumped out like a snake coiled in tall grass. Eric D. Harper. And below it, in smaller print, Linda M. Harper, unauthorized signatory. She couldn't breathe. Her throat went dry, like she'd swallowed gravel. That loan wasn't supposed to exist. Not on paper. Not like this. It had been her little shortcut, her empowerment leap, as she called it during the certification weekends. A personal investment, for both of them, she'd rationalized. So she could build something bigger than this town, than this marriage. So she could become a certified transformational resilience coach and help women reclaim their wild feminine. It was supposed to be harmless. He was never supposed to know. She remembered how easy it was. A few forged lines, a fake call to the credit union during a lunch break while Eric was at the VA clinic getting his back looked at. She even practiced his voice once, just in case. The $48,000 had funded 4 retreats, 3 advanced certification weekends in Santa Fe, and 1 VIP mastermind group run by a self-proclaimed guru named Devin Moon, who sold healing crystals for $300 a pop. Linda had told Eric it was a women's networking trip. He nodded, like always, like a man too tired to argue with whatever she'd become. But he had known. The document laid it out plainly. Eric had discovered the unauthorized loan 2 years ago during a routine check of his credit. Instead of confronting her, he'd consulted a financial attorney. Waited, documented everything. And now, he'd signed a waiver, relieved himself of all liability, turned over evidence, transferred the full burden to her, and worst of all, notified the lender. Linda's heart dropped to her stomach. She scrolled back up, eyes darting across the text, trying to find some exit clause, some misunderstanding. But it was airtight. The waiver was signed. The documents notarized. The attached exhibit showed login timestamps, IP addresses from their home Wi-Fi, and the digital fingerprint of the very PDF she had used to submit the forged form. He'd known. He'd watched her go on retreats to heal ancestral trauma and sip kombucha while she stood in circles with strangers, chanting affirmations. All while he grilled himself frozen burgers and fixed up rusted Triumphs in the garage she thought she half-owned. He'd watched her paint herself as the enlightened one. And now he'd handed her a mirror. No cracks, no fog, just truth. The lender, the document said, had already been instructed to direct all communication to Linda's personal email and home address. Eric was no longer to be contacted in any manner regarding this matter. She'd stolen his identity to reinvent herself, and now her new self came with an old debt. Her debt, fully legal, fully enforceable. The fire she'd lit was now at her heels, and there was no extinguisher in the desert. Her hands finally dropped, limp, as the last paper fluttered to the floor of the car. The heater still hummed gently. The lights of a passing semi swept through the cabin and vanished like a ghost. She looked out the windshield at the black Arizona night and realized she hadn't left with freedom. She'd left with a bomb in her lap. And Eric? He didn't have to say a word, because he'd spoken in the only language she truly listened to. Consequences. She hit call again. For the 3rd time. The screen lit up with his name, Eric D. Harper, the same way it had for decades. But the sound that followed wasn't his voice. It was that bland, Digital recording she'd barely ever heard in all their years together. The person you are trying to reach is unavailable. Please leave a message. She didn't. She hung up, stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the call icon like maybe this time the rules of the universe would bend back in her favor. Then she texted, "Eric, please." 5 minutes passed. Then 10. She added another. "Can we talk? I didn't know. Please." The typing dots never appeared. No read receipt. Just the blank cold space of a message ignored. Panic wasn't a feeling she wore often. She hated it on others. But now it clung to her ribs, sticky and hot. She flipped open her GPS and punched in the address she thought she'd never need again. Their address. The route blinked up, 40 minutes back toward Flagstaff. She didn't think. She just drove. The desert was ink black now, her headlights slicing through the emptiness as she barreled down Route 89 with her jaw clenched and a gnawing weight in her chest. The envelope and papers lay scattered across the passenger seat like wreckage. She didn't look at them. She just needed him to answer. She pulled into the driveway a little after 11. The porch light was on. The house looked exactly the same. Same wind chimes tapping lightly in the breeze. Same ceramic frog on the step she used to trip over every damn spring. She didn't even bother with the suitcase. She just got out and climbed the porch steps. Knocked once. Then again. "Eric." Her voice cracked. "It's me." "Nothing." She leaned in, hand against the doorframe, and tried again. I need to talk. Please." Still nothing. No footsteps. No voice. No sound of him clearing his throat like he always did when he was irritated. No faint hum of a TV inside. Just the wind and the creak of the trees shifting overhead. She backed up, stepped down to the walkway, craned her neck toward the side of the house. Maybe the garage light? Maybe his Bonneville was still parked there? But before she could move another step, click, the porch light flicked off. Not timed. Not an outage. Manual. Linda froze. Her breath misted in the cold. Her fingers curled, then uncurled at her sides. The dark swallowed the steps behind her, left her blinking at a door that might as well have been a wall. He was home, and he was done. That single flick of a switch, simple, clean, wordless, spoke louder than any argument, louder than any slamming door she'd expected when she left. He hadn't changed the locks. He didn't need to. Because Eric wasn't shutting her out with bolts or chains. He was erasing her with silence. With that one gesture, he made her feel what she had made him feel for years. Unseen, unwanted, unwelcome. She turned back to the car in a daze, climbed in, shut the door. And this time, the only light was the cold blue of her phone screen as she stared at the unanswered message. "Eric, please." Still sent, still delivered, and still nothing. Eric sat in the lobby of the Flagstaff Teachers Credit Union, not because he was a teacher, but because they didn't ask too many questions, and they gave free cookies in the afternoon. He liked that. Places with small talk and short lines. The clerk, a young woman named Kendra, handed him the final paperwork with a polite smile. "You'll get your new debit card in 5 to 7 business days." He nodded. "Mail's fine. I won't be here much longer." She glanced up, maybe expecting elaboration. He didn't offer any. Just pocketed the folder, thanked her with a quiet nod, and walked out into the parking lot, sun catching the freshly polished chrome of his 1969 Triumph Bonneville. He hadn't ridden it in a while. Not really. Used to just clean it, move it from one corner of the garage to the other. Linda always said it smelled like gasoline and regret. Now it just smelled like freedom. The ride to Old Town Coffee House was smooth. Crisp fall wind through the visor, pine trees flicking past like strobe lights. When he pulled up, Gary was already there. Same table near the window, same denim jacket from the 90s, patched elbows and all. "Holy hell," Gary said, standing to get a better look. "You actually brought her out." Eric grinned faintly. Time she saw some road again. They sat. No need for dramatic updates or blow-by-blow accounts. Gary already knew enough. He was one of the few who'd earned the right to know. They talked bikes, the rising cost of transmission parts, whether anyone under 30 knew what a torque wrench was. At one point, Gary asked, "So what now?" Eric stirred his coffee. "I'm thinking about the Rockies. Take the 550 north. Maybe loop into Montana. Avoid the interstates. Gary nodded like a priest receiving confession. And Linda? Eric leaned back, took in the quiet clink of spoons and low jazz playing over the speakers. I left the light on. She flipped it off. Gary didn't press. Later that day, Eric drove to a small lot just outside of town and met a guy named Lou who'd listed a used camper on Craigslist. It wasn't fancy. Worn upholstery, a tiny stove, a fridge that needed a slap to wake up. But it was clean, paid for in cash, and fit neatly behind the Bonneville with a custom hitch. By dusk, it was parked in his side yard. He packed light. Some tools. A flannel or two. A couple of books he hadn't touched since the 90s, Steinbeck, mostly. A half-used notebook. He didn't write in it. Not yet. But it was there. He stood in the driveway a long time that night, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the moonlight flick across the camper's aluminum shell. Inside the house, the rooms were still. Her perfumes were gone. The scented candles she never burned. The passive-aggressive signs about "bless this mess." All gone. No gloating. No victory lap. Just space. Linda had always said he was too quiet, too slow to respond, too calm in a crisis. She mistook that for passivity, for emptiness. She never realized that stillness was his weapon. Stillness was how he waited her out. Stillness was how he listened, remembered, prepared. Stillness was how he won. The man she'd left behind didn't exist anymore. Hell, maybe he'd never really existed to her in the first place. This man, coffee-stained, road-bound, free of apology, was someone else. Someone she'd never get to know. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months before the suitcases appeared in the hallway. Eric was under the hood of a '74 Norton Commando in the garage, arms deep in grease, the radio playing some scratchy blues station, when Gary showed up unannounced. He hadn't called, hadn't texted. Just walked into the shop with a look that didn't match the Arizona sunshine. Eric pulled the rag from his back pocket, wiped his hands, and gestured to the folding chair. "You look like someone died." Gary didn't sit. "I had beers with Larry Thomas last night." "You remember him? From the club?" Eric nodded. "Well," Gary said, glancing down, then back up like the words might get lighter if he blinked fast enough. He heard something. "From his cousin. She's in that Sedona circle your wife keeps going to. The crystal energy thing." Eric waited. She was talking. Loud. Bragging, really. Saying she's finally done playing house with that old warhorse, her words. Said you'd never see it coming. Said she's going to drain you dry and disappear down to Mexico with some money guy who does ayahuasca retreats. Eric didn't flinch. Didn't swear. Didn't laugh. He just nodded once, slow. "I see." Gary squinted. "That all you're gonna say?" Eric folded the rag, set it on the workbench, then leaned over the Norton, adjusted the carburetor like Gary hadn't just told him his wife had a post-divorce escape plan that belonged in a goddamn Netflix docuseries. "I'm not surprised," he said after a long beat. "Just disappointed I didn't tighten the bolts sooner. Gary, finally Saturday, you're taking this a hell of a lot calmer than I would." "Emotion's expensive," Eric said, turning a wrench with practiced precision. "She's already costing me enough." What he didn't say, not to Gary, not to anyone, was that he'd seen it coming. Not in a thunderclap, not in a single screaming red flag. It was quieter than that. 1,000 little tells over 3 years. The spa trips that suddenly turned into retreats. The new circle of friends that didn't include a single familiar face. The shift in how she said his name, not said it with venom, just a kind of dull indifference, like it left a bad taste in her mouth. He wasn't stupid. He wasn't even angry. He was ready. That night, he dug out the lockbox. Found the birth certificates, the marriage license, the property deeds. Sat at the kitchen table with a pot of black coffee and a yellow legal pad and started writing down what he owned versus what they shared versus what she thought she had a claim to. He made appointments the next morning. Trust lawyer, LLC advisor, credit specialist, all under the pretense of estate simplification. No one asked questions. It helped that he smiled the whole time. It took 7 weeks to build the firewall. Another 2 to install the trapdoors. He made Carter the front man on the shop. Filed paperwork with the state in between break jobs. Went to the notary like he was buying groceries. And he kept making her coffee every morning like nothing had changed. He didn't need to yell. Didn't need to argue. Because revenge, for a man like Eric, wasn't rage. It was precision. And Linda? She was still rehearsing the scene where he breaks down crying when she leaves. She had no idea the avalanche had already started, because the whisper that triggered it wasn't a scream. It was Gary, standing in the doorway of a garage, saying one quiet sentence. "She's planning to drain you." And Eric, setting down a wrench, thinking, "No, she won't." It was just afternoon when the shouting started. Eric was elbow deep in a Yamaha rebuild, his focus tight on the alignment of the valve cover, when he heard the voice, muffled through the garage door at first. Female. Familiar. Unraveled. "Eric, I know you're in there." The impact didn't register at first. The name, the tone, it felt like a phantom from another life. But when he wiped his hands and stepped around the front lift toward the lobby, the shape of the ghost came into view. Linda, on the sidewalk, half drenched in sun, half drenched in sweat. Hair frazzled, pulled into a crooked bun. Makeup melted into streaks under her eyes. Clothes loose in all the wrong places. Her designer blouse from a better year clinging to a frame 10 pounds lighter than the last time he saw her. And in her hand, her phone, held like a weapon, waving it in the air with some screenshot she probably thought would earn her an audience. "I'm not leaving," she yelled. "You don't get to pretend I don't exist, Eric. You don't get to erase me." The windows rattled with the force of her voice. A customer turned away from the counter. Another slowly stepped back from a 1978 Harley, pretending to examine the chrome while eyeing the unfolding disaster. Eric said nothing. He didn't walk outside, didn't flinch, didn't see her. He just turned slightly and caught the eye of Jasmine, his 20-something receptionist who'd only been working there for 2 months, but already knew enough about the owner to read a situation without questions. "Blinds," he said quietly. She nodded once, reached for the cord. The blackout slats slid down with a soft hiss, sealing the garage from the street, cutting Linda out like background noise. She screamed something after that, muffled now. Something about betrayal, about dignity, about how this isn't who we were. Each word punctuated by a thud of her palm against the glass door she no longer had the code to unlock. Eric walked back to the Yamaha, torque wrench in hand. He adjusted the cylinder head, quiet and focused as ever. The music hadn't stopped. That same old blues station humming softly in the background, drowning her out like static. Outside, she cracked. She cried loud. Ugly. Not the performative whimpering she used to fake on yoga retreats for sympathy from strangers. This was primal, public, desperate, and no one stopped her, because no one knew her. To the rest of the world, she was just a woman unraveling on a sidewalk in the Arizona heat. Maybe another ex-wife, maybe another bad divorce story. To Eric, she was something smaller. A shadow, a lesson, a closed chapter. Her voice finally broke to silence. Just labored breaths, sniffles, then retreating footsteps. When the coast was clear, Jasmine peeked out from behind the blinds. "She's gone," she said gently. Eric gave the cylinder one last tweak and nodded. "She's been gone a long time." The email came in at 11:42 p.m. Subject line: "Maybe you'll read this." Eric was in the camper, parked just outside a national forest turnout north of Durango. The trees whispered against the fiberglass shell, wind rustling pine needles in a way that used to soothe him after long deployments. A small fire crackled just outside, the last embers of his coffee cooling in a steel cup on the fold-out table. He didn't check his email often anymore. Didn't need to. But tonight, as the camper's propane heater hummed and the Bonneville sat quietly chained to a tree behind him, something nudged him to flip open the old laptop and sync the inbox. And there it was, Linda's name. No longer Linda, wife, in his contacts, just the email address. Unnamed, unlabeled, unanchored. He didn't open it right away. He sat back, stared at the blinking cursor next to her name like it might give away her tone, her angle. Apology? Manipulation? One last swing? Then he clicked. "I was wrong. I thought I wanted more. I thought you were the thing I had to get away from to become myself. But you were the anchor. You were always the anchor, Eric. You didn't scream. You didn't fight me. And that silence, that awful, endless silence, was the loudest thing I've ever heard. I miss your quiet strength. I missed us. I know I have no right to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know you were never the problem. I was. No dramatic plea. No mention of money or forgiveness or the fire she walked into with open arms. Just a soft confession sent to a man already gone. Eric stared at the screen for a few seconds longer than necessary. Not because he didn't understand. Because he did. The message wasn't for him. Not really. It was for the ghost of the man she thought she could manipulate. The man she assumed would crumble the minute she stepped away. The man who'd made her coffee while she plotted her exit. That man no longer lived here. He moved the mouse. Hovered over the trash icon. Click. The message vanished into digital oblivion. Gone, like a ripple smoothing out across a still lake. He closed the laptop gently. No slam. No satisfaction. Then he stood, zipped his jacket, and stepped into the chilled night air. The trees stretched out like guardians on either side of the dirt road ahead, framing the path north like an invitation. The camper engine was already purring, low and steady. He climbed in, turned on the headlights, and checked the rearview mirror once. Out of habit, not longing. And then he drove. No fanfare. No epilogue. Just the final silence of a man who owed no one anything anymore. She stood at the doorway with a beach bag slung over her shoulder, sunglasses pushed up in her hair like some damn rom-com protagonist escaping to find herself. The smell of her oversprayed perfume hit me before her voice did. I'm going to the beach house this weekend. Alone. I need time to recenter. Don't wait up. Recenter. That was a new one. Last month it was detox. Before that, spiritual reset. Whatever label she slapped on it, the routine was the same. Pack light. Wear less. Drive fast. And come back smelling like sandalwood and someone else's body wash. I didn't blink. I didn't ask questions. I just smiled from my seat at the breakfast table, folded the newspaper I wasn't reading, and said, "Enjoy the solitude." She smirked, like she'd won some invisible round in a game I wasn't supposed to know I was playing. Then she was gone, heels clacking down the hallway, the front door closing with that same rehearsed click she always used when she thought she was being elegant. But here's the thing. After 27 years, you stop reacting. You start recording. See, I wasn't always this calm. 2 years ago, when I first felt something shift, when she started dressing like a cruise line divorcee and changed her passcode twice in a week, I did what most men do. I doubted myself. Blamed work stress. Blamed hormones. Hell, I even blamed me. Maybe I'd gone too quiet, too gray. I didn't want to see what was right in front of me. But the moment that tipped it all? Valentine's Day last year. I came home early with flowers, because I'm an idiot like that, and found the fireplace lit, 2 wine glasses out, and Barry White playing on her Bluetooth speaker. Romantic, right? Except I wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't expecting me. And the second she heard the door, she turned white as drywall and knocked one of the glasses over. I was just celebrating myself, she said. She never drank red. Hated the stains. That night, I started watching. Quietly. I didn't confront her. Didn't cry. I started keeping a mental record of her language, the way she hesitated before answering basic questions, how her phone was suddenly always face down. I watched her pause in doorways like she was waiting for applause. I watched her check her reflection in windows that had no business being mirrors. Women don't do that when they're in love. They do that when they're performing. So when she brought up the solo trip, I let her believe I believed it. That Friday morning, she put on lip gloss, before a 3-hour drive to be alone. That was her final audition, and I was a damn good audience. I even helped her with the bag. You sure you don't want company? I asked, deadpan. I hear the gulls are especially romantic this time of year. She laughed. Don't be silly. I need time to breathe. Sure, sweetheart. So do snakes before they shed. What she didn't know, what she'll never know, unless she's reading this now with her jaw on the floor, is that I'd already taken PTO. I'd already packed my own bag. And I'd already left the house 3 hours earlier that morning, before the sun came up, long before she finished curling her hair for a man she thought was still her little secret. Because I was the one who turned the sheets at the beach house that day. I was the one who opened all the windows to let the ocean air in. And I was the one who set the stage for the kind of weekend you don't forget, not because it was romantic, but because it would burn her memory of that place to ash. The beach house wasn't her hideaway. Not anymore. It was mine. There's something strangely intimate about betrayal when you choose not to interrupt it, not fight it, not shout over it. Just sit back and catalog it, like an archaeologist brushing dirt off someone else's ruins. 3 months before that beach bag hit our tile floor like a punchline, I started keeping notes. Not on my phone, never digital. Too easy to slip, sink, leak. No, mine was analog. Black moleskine, hardbound. Looked boring. Respectable. Like something a retiree might use to track golf scores or blood pressure. I kept it under the cushion of the old armchair in my shed, in a plastic Ziploc, just behind the tool catalog she never touched. She wouldn't find it. She didn't even know I still used paper. Each page had a date, a time, a name, and then a brief description. January 3rd, lunch at Baxter's on Fremont, 2 p.m. January 13th, sister's house, trip, returned Sunday, 10:48 p.m., hair curled, luggage lighter. February 2nd, Stephen's truck, blue Ford, license N6VJ, parked 2 blocks down at 11:43 p.m. Stephen. I hadn't heard that name in 20 years. Her high school first love. The one who never really got her. The one who'd reached out on Facebook when his third marriage hit a wall. I found that message buried in her deleted folder one night while fixing her printer. Because yes, she still uses a Yahoo email account and clicks on cat gifs that crash her system. The subject line, crazy thinking of you again after all these years. She never replied. Not directly. But 3 days later, she bought new lingerie and told me she was going to that spa retreat with her cousin in Santa Cruz. Sure, with lace. The receipts were the easy part. She used the joint card like she was daring me to notice. Hotel stays under her maiden name. Gas stations off the freeway I'd driven with her 100 times. Once, she used my rewards account for a dinner in Monterey. Accidentally, she'd later claim. That was the day I bought the notebook. I wasn't gathering for court. I was directing a play. Every scribble, every timestamp was a stage cue. I timed her patterns. She left 14 minutes after every, I'll just be a second text. Her phone's GPS betrayed her laziness, never disabling location sharing with the car's app. I'd watch from my shed, sipping coffee, as the little dot moved down Highway 1, right to the same damn turnoff. Each time, my pen moved. Ink gliding. Calm hand. Steady. But what made the notebook powerful wasn't the obvious. It was the absurd. The careless. March 9th. Left with yoga mat. Returned with wet hair and no 10 lines. March 16th. Said, I'll bring wine to my sister's. Wine still in the pantry. She thought I was asleep most nights. She thought I was aging into oblivion, distracted by football reruns and the lawnmower's carburetor. What she didn't realize was that every bored glance I gave her was measured. Every nod was logged. I was soaking in her arrogance like acid etching steel. The show wasn't for her, either. It was for Julia, Stephen's current wife. The one who didn't post photos. The one who'd gone strangely quiet on social media right around the time my wife started smiling at her phone like it told jokes I wasn't supposed to hear. I didn't call Julia right away. I waited until the notebook had at least a dozen clean, deadly entries. Until the evidence wasn't just damning, it was undeniable. I wanted her to hear not just what I thought was happening, but what I knew. I wanted her to see that this wasn't about jealousy or ego or midlife insecurity. It was math. It was chemistry. It was engineering. I'd built bridges that carried semi-trucks across rivers. She really thought I couldn't reverse engineer an affair? On the last page of that notebook, in bold, block letters, I wrote, April 14th, beach house departure. 10:06 a.m., said, I need the ocean. Below that, a single line. She thinks I won't be there. She was right about one thing. She needed the ocean. But by the time she got to it, the tide had already turned. She picked up on the second ring. That's the kind of thing you never forget, not because it's dramatic, but because it's not. No hesitation. No screening. Just a soft, tired, hello. Like she'd been bracing for this call longer than I had. Julia, I asked, trying not to sound like a lunatic. My name's Mark. Well, I think you know why I'm calling. Silence, but not the panicked kind. Not the kind of silence that hides. Just this slow exhale, like air leaving a balloon that never got to fly. I thought so, she said, flat. Not angry. Not shocked. Resigned. That hit harder than anything. I'd rehearsed it in my head a dozen ways. I expected yelling. Maybe accusations. You must be mistaken. Stephen would never, all the usual defenses people throw up when their little illusion cracks. But Julia? Julia was already halfway through the wall, and she hadn't even looked down yet. I'm sorry, I said, suddenly ashamed of my own calm. I didn't want to drag you into something painful, but I thought you deserved the truth. She was quiet for a second. I already had the truth, Mark, she said. What I didn't have was proof. I told her about the notebook, the GPS logs, the receipts. I kept it clinical, just facts, timelines, times of day. Her voice didn't waver, but I heard her kid crying in the background. Then a cabinet door slammed. She'd muted the call for a moment, came back with a colder tone. I have 2 boys, she said, 10 and 7. I'm not in a place to make this messy, but I'm not going to sit and swallow it either. That's when something shifted. This wasn't about pain anymore. This wasn't therapy. This was strategy. I told her about the beach house. I told her they were headed there this weekend, that I'd be there first, that I had keys, that it was legally mine, that I'd set up cameras, that I wasn't planning to yell or cry or make a scene. And she said, without even a breath, do you want company? We planned like soldiers, like CEOs, like people who were done being lied to. I sent her the photos I'd taken the week before, Stephen in his usual parking spot down the block from our place, the one where he waited until my wife rounded the corner before pulling out to coincidentally run into her at that art gallery. I sent her the screenshot of the receipt, her husband's name on a $228 dinner tab bill to a place they'd gone on their anniversary 2 years earlier. Julia? She didn't cry. She laughed. A dry, brittle sound that cracked like a knuckle. He told me that was a client dinner, she said. Said it was this investor from LA. I remember he smelled like cinnamon that night. New cologne. He never wears cologne. I paused. My wife bought cinnamon body wash from Sephora last month. Said it was just a sample. Dead silence. Then, Julia whispered, they're not even trying. That's what bonded us. Not the pain. Not even the betrayal. It was the insult. The sheer stupidity of it. The way they both treated us like background props in their personal soap opera. Like we were too old, too dull, too blind to connect the dots. They didn't cheat with cunning. They cheated with contempt. And that's a whole different fuel. Julia was an HR director. Had been for 18 years. She'd seen every excuse under the sun, every fake sick day, every it's not what it looks like. She started talking logistics, timelines, legal implications. I didn't even need to lead. Give me the weekend, I said. You'll want to see it yourself. She didn't hesitate. Tell me when and where. And that was it. By the end of the call, we had a plan. A literal floor plan. She'd come to the beach house that morning. I'd let her in before they arrived. She'd wait in the guest room while I monitored the footage. She wanted to hear it with her own ears. Wanted to see his eyes when he realized he wasn't alone. 2 people. Same wound. Same anger. One difference. I had the house. She had the courtroom. And together, we had nothing left to lose. The drive down Highway 1 felt different this time. Not because of the view. I'd driven it hundreds of times. But because every mile I passed meant I was closing in on something irreversible. Betrayal doesn't burn hot. Not at this stage. It chills. Makes the world feel colder, sharper. Every tree, every coastline bend, felt like it was leaning in, watching me like nature knew something was about to go down. I pulled into the gravel lot just after 8 a.m. Early light on the porch, salt in the air, that familiar creak of the front gate. Funny how something can feel like home and foreign ground at the same time. The house looked exactly how we left it 3 months ago. Her decorative driftwood wreath still hung on the door, seashells glued to it with that amateur hot glue arrogance. A stupid symbol, really. I left it there. It would serve a better purpose soon. Inside was still pristine, because I'd made sure the cleaning crew came last week. She thought I didn't check the email notifications. She never noticed I reactivated the Nest account. She thought the beach house was her escape. She didn't realize it had become my stage. I opened every blind. Natural light exposes everything. I changed the sheets on the master bed, ivory linen, soft blue trim, her favorite set. Let her walk into familiarity. Let her get comfortable. I fluffed the pillows, even folded her robe at the foot. No detail too small. Then came the cameras. Two. One in the corner shelf of the living room, disguised in a fake succulent she'd once bought during her boho phase. The other? Hidden in the antique clock on the dresser in the bedroom. Perfect angle. Audio synced. Triggered by motion. They weren't the cheap, blurry kind. They were the kind you get when you plan ahead and know you'll only have one shot. I checked the feeds twice. Sound came through clear. I could hear the wind chimes outside. Good. Next, the fridge. Stocked just enough to look spontaneous. Wine. Strawberries. That weird cheese she always said reminded her of Italy, even though she's never actually been. I placed 2 wine glasses on the coffee table. And then I waited. Julia texted me from the parking area at 10:23 a.m. I stepped out, unlocked the back door, and let her in without a word. She looked rough, not unkempt, just drained. The kind of face that doesn't cry anymore. She carried no bags. Just her phone and a manila envelope I didn't ask about. I led her to the guest room. This room has a vent, I said. You'll hear everything. She nodded. Perfect. We didn't talk much after that. Just 2 soldiers in a foxhole. We listened to the clock. We stared out at the comm waves. She sat on the edge of the bed with her arms folded and eyes fixed ahead like she was already visualizing the explosion. I checked the notebook one last time. Her ETA was 4:45 p.m. She was never early, always just fashionably late, like she was timing her entrances for a movie score no one else could hear. At 4:52 p.m., the gravel crunched. I was already in the guest room, blinds cracked just enough. Julia sat beside me. We didn't speak. From the corner of the curtain, I saw them step out. She wore her tan summer dress, the one with the split down the side that made her feel dangerous. Stephen was in board shorts and a smug grin, holding her overnight bag like it was some prize he earned. She leaned in and kissed him on the cheek, not on the lips. That was for the bedroom. That was for later. They walked in laughing. She dropped her bag. He said, "Still smells like you." She replied, "That's because I never left." I pressed the record button. Julia clenched the edge of the comforter until her knuckles went white. And in that moment, it wasn't anger I felt. It was precision. All that dread, all that nausea, all those sleepless nights, melted into a surgical coldness. We weren't just watching a betrayal unfold. We were watching them bury themselves. The walls in that beach house were never thick. I remembered that every time we tried to argue without the neighbors catching wind, every time we thought we were whispering discreetly but ended up reliving the conversation at brunch the next day. My wife used to joke that the place had ears. She had no idea how prophetic that was. Now it was our ears, mine and Julia's, pressed to the guest room vent as the 2 of them performed their little fantasy in surround sound. "God, you still pour wine like a college kid," she giggled from the kitchen. Stephen's voice floated back, full of smug bravado. "You still blush like one." Clink. Pour. The slosh of overpriced red wine into 2 oversized glasses. And then the worst part, the silence between the words. The comfortable silence. That's what got under my skin. That familiarity. That confidence. The way they settled in. Julia didn't speak for a while. Just sat motionless on the edge of the bed, hands clasped in her lap. Then, softly, she muttered, "He brought our son here once." I turned to her. "What?" She didn't look at me. Just stared ahead, like she was watching some reel in her head. "He said he had to meet a client down here. Took Lucas with him. Said it would be fun. Bonding. They spent the night in this house." The edges of my vision went hot. My jaw tensed so hard I felt a nerve twitch in my temple. The idea that Stephen had paraded his affair not just around my life, but hers, her family, her child, in this space, this sanctuary of lies, it tipped something in me. Not rage. Not yet. Something cleaner. Harder. Sharpened. I checked the clock. 6:19 p.m. From the other room, laughter spilled again, this time softer, more intimate. "You remember that weekend we spent here in '98? My wife cooed. Stephen, that hurricane didn't stop us. Her. We were soaked anyway. I felt Julia wince beside me, and I wished, God, I wished for 1 second that they could hear us. That the house could speak back. That every smug little whisper they let slip would echo with our breathing, our silence, our eyes watching them from 5 feet away. Instead, we just kept listening. They moved to the couch. The cushions creaked, his shoes thudded to the floor. I imagined him stretching out, like a king in his castle, never realizing the floor was full of traps. My wife asked if he still had those magic fingers. He replied with something that made Julia squeeze the blanket so tight the fabric snapped. They were so relaxed, so damn confident in their secrecy. And it was that confidence that was going to hang them both. We weren't looking for drama. No door slamming, no Jerry Springer moment. This wasn't some TikTok spectacle. It was evidence. It was documentation. And tonight, they'd supply their own news with every word, every moan, every slip of the tongue that wasn't meant for ears like ours. At 7:04 p.m., my wife said something that made the air in the room shift. I don't care what it costs. I could live here with you forever. Julia reached into her pocket and handed me her phone without a word. The live recording app was running. Timestamped. Clear audio. Paired with the footage from the bedroom camera, it would be devastating. You think they'll be dumb enough to use their real names? I whispered. Julia let out a joyless, hollow sound, something between a scoff and a death rattle. He's already left the light on in the bedroom. They're not thinking at all. I looked back through the cracked blinds. The sun was setting now, slicing through the horizon like a blade. The whole beach turned orange, then red. Blood red. They'll go to dinner soon, I said. We stay put. She nodded. Because this night wasn't our climax. It was our documentation. It was their confession performed in stereo, narrated in real time, preserved forever. And the moment they stepped out that front door, thinking the only eyes on them were the seagulls above, that's when we'd strike. At 6:58 p.m. sharp, the front door opened and shut again. Their voices trailed off into the breeze, Stephen saying something asinine about oysters being nature's Viagra, and her fake laugh echoing down the steps like wind chimes made of glass and fraud. I waited 30 seconds, not out of fear, but ritual. Then I stood up, rolled my sleeves, and looked at Julia. Now, I said. She followed me down the hallway in silence, barefoot like a ghost. The living room was still warm from their presence. Her perfume lingered, cheap but heavy, like the lies she'd told over breakfast every Sunday. Stephen's sandals were by the couch. His phone was charging on the armrest. Bold move, considering how many texts were probably buried in it. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, I walked straight to the hallway closet. Third shelf, behind a stack of old board games. There, built into the back panel, was the wall safe. 4-digit code. Same one she used for our luggage, the storage unit, and, poetically enough, our Netflix account. Her birthday. She never thought I'd return. Click. The door swung open, slow and quiet. Inside, a manila envelope, a copy of our prenup, and, what I came for, the original property deed. Tucked inside a legal folder with my name on the title. Only my name. Something she never updated after our temporary separation 3 years ago. I warned her back then. Don't forget whose name is on the paperwork. She laughed it off. Never filed a thing. Tonight, that laziness became my weapon. Julia watched as I took it out, laid it on the dining table, and snapped a photo with my phone. She didn't ask what I was doing. She already knew. I moved through the house like a surgeon, no wasted motion. Next stop, the router. I opened my laptop and pulled up the cloud camera feed. 2 angles, perfectly synced, now capturing nothing but an empty house. I exported the last hour's footage. 2 wine glasses. 1 slip of the tongue. Her saying, I could live here forever. Him replying, what's stopping you? Idiot. I zipped the file and emailed it to Julia's contact at her law firm. Subject line, Beach House Footage, Exhibit A. Sent. No undo. Then I opened the back door and slid the deadbolt shut. They wouldn't be getting back in. Julia walked around the kitchen, touching things with this strange reverence, like she was in a museum of betrayal. She stopped at the sink and said, he brought my son here. He washed his hands here. Ate cereal here. I didn't have anything to say to that. So I turned off the hallway lights. Left the ones in the living room on. Just enough ambience to let them walk into the illusion that nothing had changed. Just enough normal to walk them right into the twist. I glanced at the clock, 7:42 p.m. They were probably finishing up drinks, still laughing. Still imagining a night of tangled sheets and whispered lies. She thought this trip would deepen the fantasy, that she could turn our house into their little getaway. But while she was sipping wine and playing mistress, I was executing a hostile takeover. This wasn't revenge porn. This was structural demolition. By the time they stepped back through that door, If they could step back through it, everything she thought she controlled would be under lock and key. Literally. And legally. Julia was already texting her attorney again. "It's done," she typed. She looked at me with this calm, almost admiring expression. "You didn't even raise your voice." I folded the deed into my jacket pocket. I'm an engineer. I don't yell at broken structures. I just replaced the foundation. Outside, the waves were crashing harder now. Inside, the real storm had already passed. Now came the silence before the detonation. At 9:06 p.m., the bathroom door closed and the pipes whined like they always did when the hot water tap kicked in. I didn't need eyes on her to know what was happening. She never could resist a little mirror time. A check-in with her own reflection after a few glasses of wine and someone else's attention. That was her ritual, and tonight was no different. Except this time, she wasn't just fixing her hair. I'd been watching her phone light up for hours, notifications dimming and buzzing from the couch where Stephen had left it. He hadn't even set a passcode. Cocky bastard. Thought nobody would dare open his secrets. Probably thought respect still meant something in his crumbling little kingdom. But it was her phone I was interested in now. She'd left it in her purse, which was dangling lazily off the kitchen chair, as if the whole house was hers. As if nothing could touch her here. No boundaries. No consequences. Julia had stepped out for a breath of fresh air. Said she needed 5 minutes. I think she didn't want to be in the house when the final string snapped. That left me alone. So I took my chance. I slid her phone from her bag, tapped the screen. Face ID didn't register. It never did with me. But her fingerprint? Still saved. From the time she thought it'd be cute to keep mine and hers programmed in. Nostalgia, she called it. How poetic. The screen blinked to life. Open messages. Top conversation. Stephen wineglass sweat droplets. Classy as ever. And there it was. Timestamp. 9:07 p.m. Message. Wish we could just live here. He'll never know. I stared at the text like it was a physical object. Like I could reach through the screen and feel the stupidity radiating off of it. 14 words. That's all it took to erase 27 years of shared history. Not even a metaphor. Just blunt, lazy treachery. He'll never know. That's the part that landed hardest. Not because it was cruel, but because it was insulting. She thought she was dealing with a man asleep at the wheel. A man too old, too worn down, too polite to look behind the curtain. But by the time that message landed, the wheels were already turning. Because 4 hours earlier, I'd walked into the title office in San Luis Obispo and signed a document she never expected me to sign. A full property transfer, revoking her access, removing her name, formalizing my sole ownership. Retroactively. Prenup supported. Lawyer approved. Notarized. Filed. Effective 12:01 a.m. She was dreaming about a future she didn't know she'd already lost. She wanted this place to be her hideaway, her escape with her washed-up Romeo. She wanted to turn my walls into their love nest. Wanted to gut it of memory and stuff it with new sin. And yet, by morning, she'd legally be trespassing. I scrolled a little further. Older messages. Things like, he still doesn't suspect, and I think he's given up. Stephen replying with good. That makes it easier. Photos of wine. A picture of the tide taken from our deck. My deck. I didn't take screenshots. I didn't need to. I just placed the phone back exactly where I found it. And then I sat back in the guest room, watching the little vent light glimmer with the hallway bulb outside. She returned to the living room 5 minutes later, laughing. She'd changed into that robe I folded for her earlier. The same one I bought her on our 20th anniversary. Ironic touch. She curled up on the couch beside Stephen like a satisfied guest in someone else's home. Julia returned moments later and didn't speak. She'd seen the glow in my face. She knew the tide had turned. This house feels different now, she whispered. I nodded. That's because it is. We didn't need confrontation anymore. No yelling. No speeches. We just needed the clock to strike midnight. And then, she'd wake up in a dream that no longer belonged to her. The key slid into the lock at exactly 12:03 a.m. Quiet. No jiggling. No hesitation. Just the confidence of someone who believes they're returning to their playground. Unseen, unjudged, untouched. The deadbolt didn't give. She tried again. A pause. Then a whisper. Maybe it's jammed. Stephen chuckled. You sure this is your house?" His voice had that smug, late-night bourbon looseness to it. The kind of voice that assumes every door opens for him eventually. That was the last time he'd ever sound that sure of himself. I watched from the hall, barefoot, back to the wall, while they tiptoed around the side to the rear entrance. The one I left unlocked on purpose. The final invitation to walk directly into their own execution. They slipped in, shoes in hand, whispering jokes, clinking with the leftover wine they'd swiped from dinner. Two teenagers in wrinkled skin, too old for this kind of stupidity, but too arrogant to know it. The lights stayed off. They moved by memory. She flicked on the stove light, dim, warm. He set the wine on the counter. "I should have done this years ago," she whispered, dropping her purse on the table. "You had to wait till he stopped paying attention," Stephen replied. They kissed. Julia stepped into the living room. No warning, no sound, just the sharp click of the overhead light switch. They both jumped like spooked animals. Stephen's body locked. He blinked like a man trying to recalibrate reality. My wife took a full step back, one heel catching the corner of the rug. Her purse spilled open. Keys, lip gloss, a crumpled receipt, a pair of earrings I'd never seen before. She didn't speak. Her jaw just opened slightly, like she was trying to form a question but couldn't find a single word that didn't taste like guilt. Julia stood calm, hair tied back, envelope in hand. She walked right past my wife, didn't even look at her, and stopped in front of Stephen. "You brought her here?" she asked. Her voice wasn't raised, not angry, just level. The voice of someone too tired to pretend anymore. Stephen opened his mouth, closed it, looked around, probably hoping it was a dream or a prank or something he could throw money at. Then I stepped forward from the shadows. His face changed like he'd just seen a ghost climb out of the floorboards. My wife let out this tiny, involuntary noise. A soft, high-pitched inhale, like she'd just walked into her own funeral. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Julia held out the envelope. Thick, heavy, photos, screenshots, dates, audio transcripts, itemized timelines. Every lie pinned down like a butterfly in a glass box. Stephen didn't take it. He just looked at it like it might bite. "I trusted you," Julia said, still calm. "Not just with me. With our son. You brought him here. You lied to his face. And for what? For this?" She turned slowly toward my wife, who was still frozen mid-step like a mannequin malfunctioning under fluorescent lights. "Was he worth it?" Julia asked. Silence. My wife blinked. Then, finally, she croaked out, "Mark, I can expla." I raised a hand. Not to hit, not to threaten. Just stop. And she did. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, she realized I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't suspicious. I knew. "You don't live here anymore," I said. Calm. Flat. Like reading a grocery list. She looked toward the front door. Saw her overnight bag already there, packed. I'd done it after they left. Took out the robe. Folded her things. Left nothing of hers behind except the echo of her voice and the stain of that wine glass. Then I walked to the kitchen, turned off the stove light, and disappeared back into the guest room, leaving them under full house lights, fully exposed and utterly cornered. There was nothing left to scream about. The reckoning had already spoken. Julia was the first to move. She stood there for maybe 5 seconds after I disappeared down the hallway, long enough to let the silence thicken, long enough for the shame to sink into Stephen's skin like oil on concrete. She didn't cry, didn't shake. Just slid the envelope onto the coffee table and walked toward the front door with the quiet grace of someone who'd already buried the body. No dramatic final line. No tearful, "How could you?" Not even a glance back. Just the sound of her heels brushing the floor, one steady step after the next. The door opened. Cold ocean air slipped in. Then it shut behind her. Stephen turned to follow her but hesitated, still stupid enough to think maybe a few words could glue something back together. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. The master of smug, reduced to a wide-eyed kid who touched a stove and finally understood what burn meant. He looked at me once. A flicker of something between guilt and confusion. I didn't flinch. So he left. No coat. No bag. Just shame and cheap cologne. Then it was just her. My wife, still standing in the middle of the living room, surrounded by pieces of a life she assumed would always be hers. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Not weak, shrunk. Like every lie she told had taken up more space than she realized, and now that they were gone, so was she. I didn't want it to be like this, she said quietly. I didn't answer. She stepped forward, hesitant, hand half raised, like she wanted to reach for something, me, maybe. Her old narrative. The version of me she thought would always be there, graying and obedient and blind. Mark, I raised my hand again. She stopped mid-word. You don't live here anymore, I said. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, toward the bedroom, the kitchen, anywhere but me. Then she noticed the front door, and the bag. I'd placed it just outside. A neat little pile, weekend tote, purse, keys. Even her sunglasses, folded neatly on top like some final insult. She stepped toward it slowly, opened the door, and froze. The door frame. She always hated that it squeaked. Asked me a dozen times to fix it. I never did. Tonight, it was the only sound she made as she walked out. She paused on the porch, looked down at the bag, reached for the handle, and saw the small envelope taped to it. Her name, scrawled in ink. Inside was the updated deed. She opened it right there, right under the porch light. I watched her eyes skim the first page, the second. I knew the line she'd find. Knew when she reached it because her shoulders fell and her face lost what little light it had left. Property owner, Mark L. Withers. Sole title holder. She didn't speak, didn't rage, didn't beg. She just stood there, still, holding the papers like they weighed more than the bag at her feet. And then, for the first time in a very long time, she looked at me, not through me, not around me, but at me, and said nothing. Because what could she say? She walked off that porch like a stranger who'd taken the wrong exit on a highway and realized too late it led nowhere. No words. No fight. Just the slow shuffle of someone finally understanding. She hadn't just lost the house. She'd lost the story. And I didn't slam the door. I just closed it. Quietly. And locked it. Twice. 3 weeks later, a message lit up my phone at 2:14 a.m. How could you do this to me? No punctuation. No apology. Just that one-line whimper, typed out from whatever couch or guest bed she'd landed in. Probably sent after 2 glasses of wine and a spiral through old photos she hadn't bothered to delete yet. I stared at it for a long time. Not because it hurt. Because it was funny. Me? Do this to her? I scrolled back through months of silence. Not a single previous message. No effort. No question. Just that one final gasp from a woman who set her own house on fire and then blamed the wind for changing. I didn't reply. Because there's a difference between silence and surrender. And mine wasn't weakness. It was closure. Last I heard, she was staying with a friend from her Pilates class. The kind who calls herself a healer, but charges $300 an hour to tell you your chakras are misaligned because of masculine trauma. Fitting, really. My wife needed someone who'd validate her story, one where she was the misunderstood free spirit and I was the cold engineer who never expressed his passion. Stephen went crawling back to Julia. Didn't even make it a week. Apparently Julia handed him the prenup addendum and said, "You sleep on the couch, you pee in a cup." She's not one for second chances. She's forensics, not faith. I respect that. The story spread fast. Because betrayal in small towns with ocean views travels like smoke in a glass house. By the second week, I had old neighbors texting me vague, thinking of you messages and ex-colleagues dropping hints about, if you ever want to talk about what happened. But no one really asked. They already knew. She burned her character to the ground, and I didn't lift a match. I repainted the beach house. Went with a deep gray and clean white trim. Stripped the driftwood wreath off the door. Donated every throw pillow she ever bought. Burned the ones with tassels, small act, but satisfying. You'd be surprised how flammable faux coastal chic decor is. I rented it out now. Not short-term. Long-term tenants. Quiet folks. Retired school teacher and her husband. They water the plants. Keep the place nice. I never told them what happened there. But I kept the guest room. Didn't touch a thing. The same vent. Same chair. Same angle through the cracked blinds. Because I learned something watching those two slither through my house like they own the air. People like that don't believe in consequences. They believe in loopholes. In timing. In plausible deniability. They think no one's ever watching. Until they are. So yeah, I left the guest room exactly as it was. Just in case someone else decides to test their luck. And I promise you, I'll be there. Lights off. Blinds cracked. Phone charged. I came home to an empty house. At first, I didn't notice anything was off. Just the usual silence, the faint hum of the fridge, the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Then I saw it. Right there, on the kitchen counter. A single piece of paper. I'm done pretending to love you. I'm taking everything and moving in with him. Next to it, an open ring box. Empty. I stared at the note, my pulse pounding in my ears. It was like reading the results of a test you already knew you failed, but still held out hope for a mistake. The words weren't a surprise. The coldness in them was. No dramatic farewell, no guilt, no hesitation, just a declaration. A statement of victory. I reached for the paper, my fingers oddly steady, and flipped it over. That's when I saw it. A handwritten address. Not our address. A street I didn't recognize at first, but something about it felt familiar. I pulled my phone from my pocket and punched it into Google Maps. The result loaded in a second, some suburban neighborhood a few miles from here. A house. A house bought with our money. I exhaled through my nose, slow and controlled, willing my heart rate down. My mind was already shifting gears, processing, adapting. I turned toward the trash can. Something was peeking out from the top, the crisp, white edge of a piece of paper. I reached in, pulled it out. It was a crumpled draft of the note she'd left me. But this one was different. Make sure the divorce is finalized by Friday. I don't want any delays. He's getting impatient. I let out a short, humorless laugh. She thought she had me. She thought I was too blind to see it coming, too slow to react, too weak to fight back. I set the paper down carefully, then grabbed my phone. Time to get to work. I walked to my office, my steps slow and deliberate. I wasn't in a hurry. No, I wanted to savor this. The unraveling of the game, she thought she had won. The safe was tucked behind an old bookshelf, hidden in plain sight. I knelt down, punched in the code, our wedding anniversary, how poetic, and pulled the door open. Inside, everything looked the same at first. Old documents, bank statements, a few valuables. Then I saw it. A manila folder I didn't recognize, sitting neatly on top like it was placed there recently. I pulled it out, flipped it open. The first page hit me like a freight train. Medical evaluation, cognitive decline, and early onset dementia. My name was right there, printed in bold letters, along with a forged signature from a doctor I'd never met. I flipped through the rest. Prescriptions I never took. Symptoms I never had. Then, at the very bottom of the stack, the real kicker, a power of attorney document. Signed. Not by me. In favor of Karen. I sat back on my heels, exhaling slowly. So that was the plan. Not just to leave me, not just to take what she thought she was owed, but to erase me. Reduce me to a shell, a man too sick to make his own choices, to fight back. And once I was legally incompetent, she wouldn't have to take half. She'd take everything. The weight of it settled on my chest, pressing down hard. But only for a moment. Pain, shock, they were distractions. And I didn't have time for distractions. A knock on the door startled me. I shoved the documents back into the safe, closed it, and stood. It was my neighbor, Diane. "Hey, Tom," she said with a sympathetic smile. "I just wanted to check on you. I saw Karen leaving earlier. She looked happy." I forced a chuckle. "Yeah, she, left me a note." Diane sighed. "I'm sorry, Tom. I know this isn't my place, but I've heard her talk. To her friends. She's been calling you a burden for months. Said she couldn't wait to be free of you." I stared at her, the words slashing through whatever part of me still held on to the idea that maybe, deep down, Karen had once loved me. A burden. I nodded, swallowing down whatever bitter thing was clawing up my throat. "Thanks for telling me." She hesitated, then patted my arm. "You're a good man, Tom. You deserve better." I watched her walk away, then closed the door behind me. A burden. I turned back to my office, grabbed my laptop, and started making some adjustments. By the end of the night, my house would be fully wired with cameras. Every angle. Every room she might slither back into. And as for her medications in the bathroom cabinet, I had a little experiment of my own to run. The house was silent, but my laptop screen was alive. Multiple video feeds flickered in front of me, grainy black and white images capturing every inch of my home. A week ago, this level of surveillance would have felt extreme. Now, necessary. I sat back, sipping my coffee, letting the quiet hum of the cameras do their job. Then, at 9:47 p.m., movement. Front door. Karen. She waltzed in like she still owned the place. Technically, she did, for now. But she wasn't alone. Behind her was him. I recognized him immediately, even before he spoke. Mark Spencer. Attorney. Her so-called friend. The same guy who conveniently handled our estate planning years ago. The same guy who had access to everything. They stopped in the living room, directly in view of camera 3. Are you sure he's not here? Spencer asked, glancing around. Karen scoffed, tossing her purse onto the couch. Trust me, he's either drinking himself stupid or crying somewhere. Spencer chuckled. Well, then, let's get this done. I leaned in. Karen pulled the folder from her bag, thick, heavy with documents. Spencer flipped through it, nodding. We'll finalize the sale next week, he said. Once the papers go through, you're clear. He can't touch a dime. Karen exhaled in relief, sinking into the couch. Good. I just want this over with. Spencer smirked, pulling out his phone. Oh, and don't worry about him fighting back. He won't even have the money to hire a lawyer. Karen raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Spencer leaned forward, grinning like a man who had just won a bet. Because, he said, lowering his voice, he's already bankrupt. He just doesn't know it yet. Something inside me snapped. I gripped the arms of my chair, forcing myself to breathe, to focus. Karen tilted her head, intrigued. Go on. Spencer tapped his phone. I moved everything weeks ago. Retirement accounts, savings, liquid assets, it's all in a Swiss account. He'll never find it. And even if he does, he doesn't have the connections to touch it. Karen grinned. You really thought of everything, huh? Spencer leaned back, smug. He's too dumb to even know what happened. I stared at the screen, my knuckles white. Dumb? I zoomed in on Spencer's hand, resting on the folder in his lap. The logo on the corner hit me like a lightning bolt. Rainberg Bank. Switzerland. A bank I knew very, very well. Because I used to work there. My rage cooled, replaced by something sharper. Colder. They thought they had buried me. They forgot I knew where the bodies were buried, too. I closed my laptop. Let them celebrate. Tomorrow, they'd wake up to a very different reality. I spent hours reviewing the footage, dissecting every smirk, every careless word. Spencer and Karen were so confident, so comfortable in their betrayal that they never considered the possibility that I was watching, that I was learning. By morning, I had a plan. But before I could set things in motion, I needed more. It was in the garage, buried under a pile of old shoes and Christmas decorations. An old burner phone. Karen's. I recognized it immediately. She used to keep it in her car, swearing it was for emergencies. When she got a new one last year, she must have tossed this one aside and forgotten about it. But I hadn't. I plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, and within minutes, I was scrolling through texts. Most were garbage. Old appointment reminders. Conversations with her sister. But then, a thread from an unknown number. Recent. My pulse pounded as I opened it. He doesn't suspect anything? Karen. Not a thing. He's too busy playing the pitiful, abandoned husband. You're sure about the will? Karen. Of course. The lawyer said it'll look legit. One signature, and it's done. And if he refuses? Karen. Then we wait. Stress will do the rest. I give it 6 months, tops. My stomach clenched, but I kept reading. And the house. Karen. Once he's gone, it's ours. No one will question it. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. Gone. They weren't just robbing me blind. They were planning my funeral. For the first time in my life, I felt something beyond rage. Beyond betrayal. Cold. Absolute. Clarity. They thought they had me in a corner. They didn't realize who they were dealing with. I took a deep breath, closed the phone, and went to my desk. It was time to make a call. Not to Karen, not to Spencer, but to the State Bar Association. By the end of the day, an anonymous complaint had been filed. By the end of the week, Spencer would be disbarred. By the end of the month, Karen would realize the man she bet everything on was no longer her golden ticket. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. They wanted me gone? They should have made sure I was dead first. The locksmith finished the job in under an hour. New locks, new security codes, new rules. Karen thought she could waltz back in here like nothing happened. Like this was some game she could play at her convenience. Not anymore. I sat in my office, watching the cameras, sipping my coffee as the final piece of my plan fell into place. I had already rerouted all my mail to a private P.O. box. No more conveniently missing documents or surprise legal notices. Every package, every letter would go through me first. By the time Karen realized what had changed, it would already be too late. And then, right on schedule, at 7:32 p.m., she came home. I saw her pull into the driveway, stepping out of her car like she owned the place. She walked right up to the door, digging into her purse for her keys. She didn't even look at the cameras. That's what happens when you think you're untouchable. Click. She tried the key. Nothing. Frowning, she tried again. Harder. Still locked. I could see the confusion flicker across her face through the grainy black and white feed. She pulled out her phone, dialing, probably Spencer. But she wouldn't get through. I had already arranged for his number to be blocked on my accounts. Her, too. I leaned back, watching the frustration grow. She tried the key one last time, rattling the doorknob like some angry tenant who just realized their lease had been revoked. Then she lost it. She slammed her fists against the door, her voice shrill and desperate. Tom, open this door right now. I didn't move, didn't even blink. She banged again. This is my house. You stole it. Ah, the irony. A week ago, that note she left me was supposed to be the end. Her grand escape. Now she was locked out of the very life she thought she had secured for herself. I let her scream. Let her rage. Let her taste the helplessness she had planned for me. And then, just as she finally stepped away from the door, furious and defeated, she dropped her purse. The contents spilled onto the porch, scattering across the welcome mat. Keys. A fresh set. Not for this house. For her new house. The one she had planned to share with Spencer. The one she didn't know I had already sold. I chuckled, watching her scramble to collect her things. This was only the beginning. I sat in my car outside the police station, gripping the folder in my hands. Inside it were copies of everything. The forged medical records, the fake power of attorney, even the text messages from Karen's burner phone detailing how they planned to kill me off in slow motion. I had spent my entire life believing in fairness, in playing by the rules. I coached football for decades, drilled discipline and integrity into every kid who passed through my team. But now I saw the truth. Rules only work when everyone follows them. Karen and Spencer? They didn't believe in rules. So now neither did I. I walked through the station's glass doors and straight to the fraud division. I didn't need a lawyer to explain it to them. The evidence spoke for itself. The detective, a grizzled guy in his 60s, flipped through the documents, his expression unreadable. When he got to the forged will, his jaw clenched. "This is bad," he muttered. "This is real bad." He looked up at me, eyes sharp. "You sure you want to go through with this?" I stared at him. They were planning my funeral before I even got sick. He didn't ask anything else. The arrest happened faster than I expected. 1 minute, Spencer was sitting comfortably in his office, no doubt preparing another round of legal warfare against me. The next, he was in cuffs, shoved into the back of a squad car. Fraud. Conspiracy. Attempted theft by deception. But Karen? Karen was gone. By the time the police went to pick her up, she had already disappeared. I wasn't surprised. I had cameras, but she had instincts. A lifetime of manipulating, twisting, escaping. She knew when to cut and run. And she had help. A bag full of stolen money can open a lot of doors. It was 2 days later when my son called. I stared at his name on the screen for a long time before answering. We hadn't spoken much in the past few years. Not since Karen got her claws in his head, whispering poison. I hit accept. His voice was tight, furious. What the hell did you do, Dad? I exhaled, bracing myself. I did what I had to. Silence. Then, the words that hit harder than any punch ever could. Mom said you're a vindictive bastard. She said you destroyed her life for no reason. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone. Mom said. I know what Mom said. I cut him off, my voice steady. What did she show you? He hesitated. Nothing. Of course. Because Karen's entire empire was built on words, not proof. She always knew how to control the story. I took a slow breath. Let me guess. She told you I cheated her out of everything? That I left her penniless? Silence. She said you turned the police on her. No, I said. She did that herself. I heard his breathing on the other end. The hesitation. The confusion. Then, he said something I wasn't expecting. She left, he admitted, voice quieter now. Took a bag and disappeared. I sat up. Where? I don't know, he muttered. She wouldn't tell me. Just said she needed to get away before you ruined everything. Of course. Karen knew she couldn't charm her way out of this one. The net was closing in. But she wasn't just running. She was regrouping. That's when I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. That night, I went through the cameras one last time. I watched the footage of her last moments in the house. The way she stormed out with that black suitcase clenched in her fist like a lifeline. I zoomed in. At first, it was just a pile of neatly folded clothes. Money. Then, something else. A file. Thin, but deliberate. Placed on top of everything else, like it was the most important thing in the world. I enhanced the image, my stomach twisting. It wasn't just a file. It was a collection of photos. Of me. I clicked through the angles. The way they were organized, the notes scribbled in the margins, it didn't take long to piece it together. This wasn't just about taking my money. She had been watching me, studying me, planning for me to die. And then, at the very bottom of the page, scrawled in Karen's handwriting, the words that sent ice through my veins. Target, stroke before 60. I closed the laptop, staring into the dark. She wasn't just running. She was waiting. For me to break. Too bad for her. I was just getting started. Courtrooms aren't like the movies. There's no dramatic music, no perfectly timed gasps from the audience. Just a cold, sterile space where lives get dissected under fluorescent lights. Karen sat across from me, her hair styled, her makeup perfect. She still had that same look in her eyes, the one she always had when she needed to win. She thought she had something. She thought she could still play the game. The judge flipped through the evidence I had submitted. Hours of security footage, financial records, the fraudulent medical documents, the forged power of attorney, the messages, every dirty little trick she had tried. Her lawyer, not Spencer, obviously, since he was still sitting in a jail cell, was trying to spin it. Your Honor, my client was under extreme emotional distress. Her actions, the judge interrupted, included attempting to steal her husband's estate, forging medical records, and conspiring with her legal counsel to defraud him. Would you like me to continue? The lawyer shut up. Karen clenched her jaw, but she wasn't done. Not yet. She reached into her bag, pulled out a stack of old letters. I already knew what they were before she even spoke. Your Honor, she said, her voice steady, these are letters written by my husband years ago. They show a history of neglect, of emotional manipulation. She turned to me, eyes narrowed. He was never the saint he pretends to be. She handed them to the judge, her chin tilted in defiance. For a moment, there was silence. Then, I chuckled. Just once. Karen flinched like she'd been slapped. The judge glanced at me. Mr. Callahan? I nodded. Your Honor, I'd like to submit an additional piece of evidence. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single document. A background report. The judge skimmed it. His expression darkened. Is this correct? Oh, it's very correct. I turned toward Karen, and for the first time in her life, she looked nervous. Your Honor, let's talk about my wife's emotional distress. specifically the man she conspired with. I tapped the document. Mark Spencer, a convicted felon. Real name, Marcus Spencer Dalton. He served 8 years for fraud before changing his identity and getting a fake law degree. Karen's face drained of color. He conned other victims, including his previous employer. Oh, and that Swiss bank account. I grinned. It wasn't in her name. It wasn't even in mine. It was his. The courtroom buzzed. Karen's lawyer looked like he wanted to throw up. I wasn't done. Your Honor, one last piece of evidence. I placed a small leather-bound book on the table. Karen's journal. The one she had so carefully hidden away for years. The judge opened it, flipping through the pages. His face was unreadable. Then, he read out loud. Marrying Tom was the smartest thing I ever did. He doesn't know it, but his father's estate is the real prize. I'll put up with the boring years if it means I get every last cent. Karen froze. The silence was deadly. I turned to her, my voice calm. You married me for my father's inheritance. You admitted it. In your own words. Her breath hitched. The judge set the book down, his gaze sharp. I've heard enough. He turned to Karen's lawyer. If your client wishes to avoid additional charges, I'd suggest a settlement. The lawyer nodded quickly. Karen sat there, completely still. Then, finally, she turned to me. Her voice was quiet, but laced with fury. You ruined my life. I met her eyes. No, Karen. I exhaled, feeling nothing. You did that yourself. The house was empty now. No furniture, no echoes of the past. Just a hollow shell of what used to be a home. I stood in the doorway, letting the silence settle around me. I had lived here for over 20 years. Built a life here. Built a lie here. Now, it wasn't mine anymore. The sale went through yesterday. The papers were signed, the money transferred. The new owners would move in by the end of the week. I didn't care. I had somewhere better to be. The trailer wasn't much. A 200-square-foot box on wheels, parked by a lake I hadn't seen since my 20s. But it was quiet. Peaceful. It was mine. No marble countertops. No imported furniture. No Karen. I stepped outside, letting the wind off the water hit my face. The air smelled like pine and earth, real things. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was suffocating. I was free. Then my phone rang. Karen. I let it buzz, staring at her name on the screen. She should have been in prison. But the plea deal kept her out for now. The judge stripped her of everything, wiped her name off any claim to my estate. Now, all she had were debts. And a motel room. I picked up. Didn't say anything. Just waited. Her voice came through, small, desperate. Tom. I didn't respond. She exhaled shakily. I wanted to say that I know I made mistakes. I got caught up in things that... I heard it then. The noise in the background. A faint, distorted recording. Rooms available, starting at $29 a night. My lips curled. A motel. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling because she had nowhere else to go. I just need some time, she continued, voice cracking. I'll fix this. I'll get it all back. She still didn't get it. I finally spoke. Karen. She sucked in a breath. Yeah. I stared out at the water, the reflection of the setting sun rippling across the surface. You won't. Silence. Then a click. I tossed the phone onto the table inside, walked back outside, and watched the sun go down. Let her rot. It was deep in one of the old boxes, tucked between yellowed newspaper clippings and forgotten birthday cards. A letter. The paper was brittle, the ink slightly faded, but my father's handwriting was still clear, still steady. Tom. You're a good man, but don't be blind. That girl, Karen, she asked me for money before the wedding. Said you'd never have to know. Be careful. Some people don't marry for love. Some just wait for the right time to collect. Dad. I sat there for a long time, holding the letter in my hands. How many times had I ignored the warnings? The signs? The little moments where Karen's love had felt calculated rather than real? And my father, he had seen it before I ever did. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. Just tired. Later that evening, my son arrived. I hadn't seen him in weeks. Not since Karen vanished into whatever hole she was hiding in. He stood at the door of my trailer, awkward, unsure. He wasn't a kid anymore, but something about the way he hesitated reminded me of the boy he used to be, the one who used to sit in the passenger seat of my truck, asking 1,000 questions about football, about life. I gestured for him to come in. He sat across from me at the tiny kitchen table, drumming his fingers against the wood. Finally, he spoke. "Mom told me to steal your papers." The words hung between us, thick, heavy. I didn't react, just watched him. He swallowed hard. "Your will, your bank stuff. She wanted me to take them before the divorce. Said it was just in case." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. I told her no, and she flipped. I nodded slowly. "I'm not surprised." He looked up at me then, eyes filled with something that almost looked like shame. I didn't stop her, though. I mean, I didn't help, but I didn't stop her either. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. "You were caught in the middle. I get it." He let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah? Well, I don't." He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. "I spent years believing her version of things, letting her trash you. And now," he swallowed, "now I don't even know what's real." I stood, walking over to one of the remaining boxes I hadn't unpacked, pulled out an old, worn-out photo album. I set it in front of him. He frowned. "What's this?" "Our inheritance," I said simply. He opened it, flipping through the pages. Photos, fishing trips, birthday parties, a camping trip where he caught his first fish and insisted we fry it, even though it was too small to feed anyone. His breath hitched. I leaned back. That's what's real. Not the money, not the house, not the lies. He turned another page, his fingers shaking slightly. I watched as the weight of everything settled in his expression. Then, finally, he nodded. "I'm sorry, Dad." I exhaled. So was I. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. The bar smelled like stale beer and regret. Karen wiped the counter half-heartedly, her nails bitten down to the quick, her once manicured hands now rough, dry. The bartender job wasn't forever, she told herself. Just temporary. Just until she figured things out. She had been somebody once. Now, she served drinks to nobodies. The television mounted in the corner flickered with muted news coverage, another story about some politician screwing up, some celebrity divorce, the usual. She barely glanced at it. Then the segment changed. She heard a name she hadn't heard in weeks. Her hand tightened around the rag. On the screen, the camera panned over a lakeside property, rustic cabins scattered along the shoreline. Veterans in wheelchairs, some with prosthetic limbs, sat by a fire pit, laughing. A reporter stood in the center of it all, holding a microphone. Behind her, a large wooden sign. Camp Callahan, honesty is our currency. And then him, Tom, smiling, shaking hands with a group of veterans. He looked healthy, strong, like a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side untouched. Karen's stomach twisted into a knot. A customer at the bar, a middle-aged guy nursing his whiskey, glanced up at the screen. "Hey," he said, pointing. "Ain't that the guy from the papers? The one whose wife tried to rob him blind?" Karen's grip on the rag went wide-knuckled. Another patron leaned in, watching. "Yeah, that's him. Hell of a comeback, huh?" Karen turned away, pretending to focus on the cash register, but her pulse pounded. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to be broken. He was supposed to be miserable, drowning in the mess she had left behind, crawling back, begging. Instead, he was thriving. On the screen, Tom spoke into the mic, his voice calm, steady. "This place isn't just for me," he said. "It's for every veteran who's ever felt lost, who's ever needed a second chance." The customers in the bar nodded approvingly. One of them raised his glass. "Good man," he muttered. Karen's face burned. She reached for a glass and started scrubbing it so hard it nearly cracked in her grip. The TV cut back to the reporter, smiling. An incredible turnaround for a man who nearly lost everything. Karen's jaw clenched. She had lost everything. And he built something better. She slammed the glass onto the counter and stormed toward the back, pushing through the employee door. Outside, in the dim glow of the parking lot, she leaned against the wall, her breath coming fast. For the first time, it hit her. Tom wasn't looking back, and no one was coming to save her. The envelope was thin, unmarked. No return address. Just my name, written in Karen's familiar, looping handwriting. I almost threw it away, but I didn't. Instead, I took it inside, sat down at my small kitchen table, and slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a single key and a note. "I'm sorry. The house was always yours." That was it. No long-winded apology. No desperate plea for redemption. Just those 2 sentences. I turned the key over in my palm. It was for our old house. The one she fought so hard to steal. The one she was willing to commit fraud, betrayal, even murder for. Now, she was giving it back. I exhaled, shaking my head. Too little, too late. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find my son standing there, hands in his jacket pockets, his expression unreadable. I stepped aside, letting him in. He sat across from me, his eyes drifting to the envelope on the table. "Did you hear?" he asked, voice quiet. I didn't have to ask what he meant. I already knew. Still, I let the silence stretch. Finally, he swallowed. "She's dead." I nodded once. Not in shock. Not in grief. Just acknowledgement. "Alcohol," he added after a pause. "Liver failure." I ran my thumb over the key, feeling its worn edges. The weight of it in my palm felt meaningless. "She was at some rundown motel," he continued. "No friends. No money." He hesitated. "No one even knew she was sick." Another long silence. Then, "She used to be happy, right?" He looked up at me, frowning. "Before everything?" I let out a slow breath, staring past him, past the walls of my small trailer, past the years of damage she had left behind. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe." He nodded, digesting that, then glanced back at the key. "So, what are you going to do with it?" I stood up without a word, walked outside to the lake. My son followed, shoving his hands deeper into his pockets. The water was calm, reflecting the setting sun like glass. I turned the key over one last time, feeling the cold metal against my skin. Then, without hesitation, I threw it. It hit the surface with a soft splash, disappearing beneath the ripples. For a moment, we just stood there, watching the water smooth over like it had never been disturbed at all. After a long pause, my son sighed. "You're not happy, are you?" I glanced at him. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm alive." He nodded, kicking at the dirt. "That's enough," he murmured. I watched the sun slip lower beyond the trees, the sky fading to deep orange. Yeah, it was enough. "I swear to God, Janine, if you board that cruise with him, I'm gone." I didn't yell. I didn't slam my fork down or throw a glass like in one of those overly dramatic soap operas she watches while pretending to work from home. I just said it, like a weather report. Calm, neutral, like I'd already accepted the hurricane was coming, and I was just covering the windows. She blinked at me across the candlelit table. The risotto was cooling, untouched. Outside, the Gulf Coast breeze tapped against the glass like it wanted to be in on the conversation. Then she laughed. Not just a chuckle. A full, sharp-bellied, mascara-cracking laugh. "It's just a cruise, Richard. You're being dramatic," she said, swirling her wine like this was some kind of rom-com, not the slow bleed ending of our marriage. "Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness." She clinked her glass against mine and added, "I need a break. We need a break. It's not like I'm going to bang my ex on a buffet table." Funny, considering I hadn't even mentioned Frank yet. That little slip of the tongue was more revealing than she realized. I didn't blink. I just raised my glass back, drained the last of the Pinot Noir, and set it down gently on the linen napkin like a man finishing the last move in a long, quiet game of chess. Then I smiled. Not the kind she could decode. This one was the old Richard smile. The pre-retirement one. The one I used when I out-negotiated 3 generals and a German liaison in a locked NATO room with nothing but a whiteboard and a marker. She didn't recognize it. She never paid attention to the old me. That night, while she was in the bathroom giggling with her friend over FaceTime, probably showing off the matching cruise tickets, I logged into an account she hadn't seen in a decade. The username? One she used to mock. Aviator 1973. She never thought to delete it from the cloud, and I never told her I had synced it to my private drive. The first thing I saw was a folder labeled Girls' Trips. It hadn't been opened in years. I clicked it, expecting selfies, wine tastings, maybe beach photos with emojis over cleavage. What I found was way more valuable. Timestamps. Same hotel lobby in Tampa, 4 years in a row. Frank's watch in the reflection of her sunglasses. His tacky tribal tattoo in the corner of a selfie she'd cropped too tightly. I exhaled slowly. Not from shock. From the weight of being right. Again. So I did what any rational aerospace engineer would do. I started building my launch sequence. While she posted a photo captioned, "Wife of the Year, maybe next year," with a smirk that could slice marble, I opened a new spreadsheet. Not for revenge. For logistics. Her face glowed from the screen across the room. She hadn't even gone on the cruise yet, and she was already posing like a trophy wife for a man who hadn't worked a day since the Bush administration. I looked at the condo. My condo. She never paid a cent into this place, but she walked around like the queen of some Instagram Versailles. The art on the walls was mine. The furniture? Mine. Even the damn ceramic flamingo in the hallway mine. And Frank would be laying on my bed with my wife, drinking cocktails I paid for. Until now. I opened a locked drawer in my home office and pulled out a key. It was small, rusted, had a red tag on it that said backup in my own handwriting. She'd probably never noticed it because she never dusted in here. I held it in my palm for a second. It was cold, solid, real, and unlike Janine's promises, it had never lied to me. 2 days later, she left like she was heading to brunch, light, careless, sunglasses on indoors, dragging that ridiculous rose gold suitcase that matched her Instagram persona more than her actual life. No kiss. Not even a glance back. Just the sound of her roller bag clicking down the condo hallway and her saying, "Don't wait up," like this was some cutesy joke and not the final nail in a 23-year marriage. I didn't wait up. The second the door shut, I walked to our bedroom, to the walk-in closet, hers, technically, but she made it mine the day she stepped over the line. There, buried behind shoeboxes labeled with brands I could never pronounce right, was a drawer with a broken lock I had replaced years ago. She thought it was jammed. I let her think that. Inside sat the key. Simple. Metal. Labeled with a piece of duct tape and my old Sharpa handwriting. Backup. I stared at it for a moment, not for sentiment, but calculation. This wasn't a key to an escape. It was a key to a beginning I'd quietly preserved in case the storm ever came. The drive took 40 minutes. 3 towns over. A place we never visited because the neighbors were too quiet, as she once put it. What she meant was there were no followers to impress out there, no beach clubs, no brunch crowd to validate her tan or her filtered posts. I punched in the code on the keypad. The wrought iron gate buzzed and creaked open like it was welcoming me home. It was still mine. The deed was still in my name. I had never sold it. She'd assumed I had when we moved into the condo, just like she assumed I canceled that life insurance policy after we merged finances. She never asked. She just believed I was harmless. The property was exactly how I left it. A single-level stone house with hurricane-proof windows, solar panels, and a 3-car garage. Quiet. Clean. Unseen. Inside, the air smelled like cedar and dust, untouched, unbothered. The kind of place you keep not because you need it, but because you never know when the world will betray you. I walked through each room like I was reloading an old operating system. The second bedroom still had its file cabinets. The home office, its backup server. I opened the wall safe, typed in the code, her birthday, ironically, and heard the mechanical whir as it popped open. Everything was there. The alternate accounts, the documents, the notarized papers she never knew existed. Even the duplicate of our prenup, the original one, not the updated version she had me sign after her mother's estate payout. This one had the clause. The one she forgot. Or ignored. I flicked on the lights and sat down at the heavy oak desk. Then I started the clock. While Janine was snapping selfies in a floral bikini with Frank's meat pod arm wrapped around her waist, captioning it, "Making up for lost time sun kiss Mark," I was making a different kind of memory. One that wouldn't fit in a carousel post. My laptop glowed. First call, my attorney. I gave her the property address, confirmed active ownership, and told her to prepare the trust update. Second call, a locksmith. Third, the firm managing my offshore account. Every wheel I'd greased years ago began to turn again. Quietly. Without friction. Like they'd been waiting for this moment. You don't build rockets for a living without learning to prepare redundancies. She thought she was sailing away on some turquoise dream with the ghost of her high school fling. She had no idea I was already building the landing pad for me and the eject seat for her. Wednesday morning, the Florida sun poured through the blinds of the stone house like nothing had changed. But everything had. I sipped my black coffee, no sugar, no cream, scrolling through the digital battlefield that was Janine's Instagram. She'd always said she used it to stay connected. I used to believe that. Before I realized connected meant validating herself with curated chaos and filtered nostalgia for people she hadn't seen since the Bush administration. And there it was. Midfeed. Posted at 6:48 a.m. Eastern, which would be just before breakfast service on the ship. The kind of hour when your mask slips because you think the world's still sleeping. A photo. Janine, in a white robe with hotel embroidery on the lapel. Leaning, no, melting into Frank's chest like he was her goddamn savior, and not the man who once called her dead weight behind her back at a barbecue I hosted. Caption. Some things just feel right again. Dizzy Sun passenger ship. No shame. No ambiguity. And crucially, no privacy settings. She tagged the cruise company, geotagged the ship, even added a little heart next to his name in the comments. Frank had replied with, "Couldn't agree more, baby face blowing kiss dot." Classy. My fingers didn't hesitate. I took a screenshot. Then another, just in case. Then I clicked share and sent it directly to my attorney with the message, "This post confirms emotional infidelity. Public. Timestamped." She's done. But I wasn't finished. I scrolled back through my phone, found a number I hadn't dialed in years, Devin Caraway. Silent investor. Discreet problem solver. Back when I managed classified aerospace logistics, he handled things. Quietly. Legally. Strategically. He answered on the second ring. Still efficient. "Richard, it's time." There was a pause. She made it public? She practically submitted it for a magazine spread. "Good," he said. "Then she's no longer an uncertainty. She's a liability." Which means we move forward. The call ended without a goodbye. It never needed one. Next, I opened a shared file I'd been quietly assembling since before she left, an asset map of everything joint, everything she assumed would be hers in the event of a separation. She thought infidelity only mattered if there was sex, a scandal, a confession. What she didn't know, what most people don't, is that documented emotional betrayal, when public and tied to shared finances, gives you teeth in the right jurisdictions. And we were in exactly the right jurisdiction. Her posts weren't just tacky. They were legally idiotic. She had openly mocked me, boarded a romantic cruise with her ex, and declared emotional fulfillment with another man, while married, while on our dime, on my dime. And she tagged the cruise company. That meant proof of joint expenditure on a romantic getaway that benefited her and another man. That meant marital assets being used to indulge an extramarital relationship. That meant grounds, not just for divorce, for clawback. I opened my files. Line by line, account by account, I began marking everything she had touched in the past year that could be labeled a luxury. The spa days. The work trips that I now knew were rendezvous. The shopping sprees she told me were networking expenses. I flagged them all. When you've managed billion-dollar defense contracts, you learn to document every cent like it's a landmine. The funny part? She thought she had the upper hand. Thought I was some soft, retired man whose biggest threat was an icy stare and a passive-aggressive comment over dinner. She forgot who I was before retirement. She forgot I used to outmaneuver generals and senators with nothing but a spreadsheet and a smirk. Let her keep posting. Let Frank keep commenting. Every click was just another nail in their social media-shaped coffin. And I was already carving the gravestone. At 7:14 a.m. the next morning, I sent one email with the subject line, Initiate adjustment protocol, Tier 1. No emotion, just instructions. By noon, the paperwork was already in motion. The firm that handled my living trust didn't ask questions. That's why I chose them, quiet professionals with no appetite for drama, only precision. I had set it up long ago, during my final year overseeing multinational aerospace logistics. Just in case. Redundancy, as we called it. Backup plans for the backup plan. By 8 p.m. that night, the condo in Naples, yes, that condo, the one Janine filled with overpriced marble vases and those hideous abstract paintings of empowered women, was no longer part of the marital estate. Legally, it had shifted into an irrevocable trust under our daughter's name. Same with the Tesla she bragged about leasing herself, and the Audi she kept in the garage for beach days. And the rental property in Port Charlotte? Gone from her reach. Moved into a holding company under my signature, and that holding company? Well, the only other signer on it now was Vanessa. I wasn't doing this to punish Janine. I wasn't chasing revenge, not yet. I was insulating everything she had touched but never truly owned. She thought marriage gave her access. She forgot marriage doesn't erase paperwork. Or intent. I pulled out a weathered folder from the desk drawer. It still smelled like old toner and pine. Inside, our original prenup, the one she thought we revised together after her inheritance came through. But I never tore up the original. Just let her believe I had. Like I said, redundancy. That folder would matter later. For now, I was focused on removing her financial fingerprints from everything I had built. Janine liked to say, marriage is about sharing. But what she meant was, you build, I decorate, and we call it equal. Except I remembered the nights I slept in server rooms in Berlin while she was busy tagging Frank in old throwback posts and calling it just nostalgia. No, it was preservation time. Every account I touched got a new beneficiary. Every access point got reset. Even the Wi-Fi passwords changed. But the message that mattered most wasn't sent to my attorney. It was sent to my daughter. Vanessa was 28. Smart. Not just book smart, but eyes wide open smart. The kind that asks questions in quiet rooms and listens longer than she talks. She'd always known something wasn't right with her mother's performative chaos. But she never said it outright. Until now. I typed. Subject, check your email. You'll understand soon. Attached, notarized trust revisions, asset updates, and a simple chart titled, in case you ever doubt where you stand. She didn't reply right away. Vanessa wasn't impulsive. She'd read every line twice before calling. And sure enough, 5 hours later, the phone rang. Dad, she said. Did something happen? Your mother made a choice, I replied. So I made some too. There was silence. Is she with Frank? She posted about it. She exhaled, slow. I remember that bastard. He used to call me kiddo like he forgot my name. I let that hang. Then she said the words I didn't expect. Do I need to prepare for anything? I paused. Only to keep what's yours. We didn't say goodbye. We didn't need to. She understood. Janine had always believed that Frank was some lost fairy tale that got away. She never realized I was the one who stayed for her, for our daughter, for the house, the bills, the goddamn gardenias she insisted on planting even though she hated bugs. No, she could have her fairy tale. I was writing a new story, one with no rose-colored filters, and it had already begun. The call came after dark. Vanessa never called late unless something was wrong or something was burning. This was both. Dad, she said, voice low, direct. I saw Mom's post. I didn't ask which post. I knew exactly which one had lit the match. She didn't wait. Is that Frank? I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence do the talking. Let her sit with the weight of it. That kind of quiet has gravity. So it is, she muttered. Jesus. Another pause. I could hear her shuffling, maybe pacing. She always paced when the walls in her brain started closing in. I remember him, she said finally. He cheated on her. With, who was it? Her friend, right? Some woman from her yoga class. I said nothing. Not because I didn't remember, but because she remembered. Vanessa was 13 when the Frank incident happened. Too young to understand everything, but old enough to overhear her mother screaming into a wine glass on the phone and calling someone a Pilates prostitute. Frank had been a footnote ever since. An erased chapter Janine tried to rewrite through healing and letting go. What she meant was reshaping history until it fit the version that made her look brave, not broken. Vanessa continued. So let me get this straight. She dumps you emotionally for years, spends your money like Monopoly cash, and now she's on a cruise with the one guy who gutted her before you ever came into the picture. Still, I said nothing. She laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. More like a dry, exhausted cough from the soul. Well, okay. Then quieter. Do I need to prepare for anything? I closed my eyes. Not in pain. In purpose. Only to keep what's yours, I said. The line went silent. I imagined her in her apartment, the one I helped her finance 2 years ago, the one Janine said was too modest for someone with her last name. Vanessa standing barefoot in her kitchen, the fridge humming, the email still open on her screen. The documents. The trust transfer. The clause with her name highlighted. And beneath it, my handwritten note. You are not a casualty. You are the heir. She finally spoke again. Does Mom know yet? No, I said. But she'll feel it soon. Vanessa cleared her throat. And Frank, he'll feel it first. She didn't ask how. She didn't need to. That's the difference between Janine and Vanessa. Janine chased moments. Vanessa understood momentum. We talked a few more minutes. Nothing heavy. She asked if I was eating well, classic daughter script, and I told her yes. I didn't mention I'd been eating at the same kitchen table she used to do her science fair projects on. The one Janine tried to throw out when we moved because it didn't match the coastal aesthetic. After the call, I stared at the old family photo framed on the wall of the stone house. The three of us. Janine in a white sundress, Vanessa in pigtails, me in a shirt I hadn't worn since 2011. Back then, it looked like a family. Now, it looked like foreshadowing. I pulled it down and placed it in a drawer. Janine had chosen her past. Vanessa was my future. And I'd already started making sure it would never be hijacked by people who thought loyalty was a game you only played when the camera was on. The man was already sitting at the cafe when I arrived, punctual, sharp, and drinking an espresso like he was auditioning for a cologne ad. He wore a slate gray suit with a subtle pinstripe and no tie. Everything about him said precision, from the folded pocket square to the absence of dog hair on his trousers. In Naples, that was a statement in itself. No wasted motion, no frills, just calculated presence. He stood as I approached, extended a firm hand, and introduced himself only as Marcus. We sat without small talk. Neither of us were there for conversation. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out the fob. It was small, black, Bentley insignia polished to a perfect, arrogant gleam. Park it, I said. Exact spot. Her condo. Same place she used to pull into after Pilates, wine tastings, and whatever else she pretended was productive. Marcus nodded once. Facing out, I added. I want her to see the grill first. He took the key and slid it into his jacket pocket like it was a museum artifact. And if she approaches? You don't speak, I said. You wait. You stand by the driver's side, casually, like you belong. She'll fill the silence all on her own. He raised an eyebrow. She'll think I'm you. Exactly. That smile of his, the kind a surgeon makes when handed the right scalpel, crept across his face. So I plant the seed. You're the seed, the pot, and the water, I replied. Let her mind do the gardening. He finished his espresso in one sip, stood, and buttoned his jacket with a practiced flick. I handed him a printed photo, an aerial shot of the parking lot with her space marked in red ink. Old habits die hard. She always parked in that one, even after I told her I paid extra for covered. You don't go inside, I said. I don't speak. I don't move unless she speaks first. Got it. And if she asks why you're there? He grinned. I'll smile. I nodded. Good man. We didn't shake hands again. He simply walked off, his steps measured, his posture like a man who owned the sidewalk. I watched him cross the street, slide into the driver's seat of the Bentley I'd had trailered in from storage that morning, and merge into traffic like smoke. That Bentley, deep navy, chrome trim, custom plates removed, wasn't just a car. It was a message. Not loud, not flashy, just impossible to ignore. I'd bought it before Janine ever knew Frank existed. Back when we still believed in things like anniversaries and joint retirement plans. She hated it, called it excessive, said it was trying too hard. But she posted it to her story the day it arrived. Called it our new ride with champagne in hand. Of course, When Frank rolled back into her life with his Jeep and his spontaneity, suddenly my car was a symbol of ego. Let's see what it symbolized now. Because what Janine never understood, what people like her never understand, is that sometimes the most powerful message is presence. You don't need confrontation, just placement. Let her come home, sun-kissed and smug, dragging her suitcase behind her like a badge of defiance, only to see something waiting in her sacred little space. Not a man, not an argument, just a silhouette, a reflection, a question with no answer. That's how you start to break someone. Not with anger, with silence and a Bentley. The rideshare pulled in slow, like even the car could sense something was off. Janine was in the back, sunglasses too big for her face, hair still styled in that cruise ship blowout way she thought screamed youth, but now just made her look like someone trying to relive a decade that never wanted her in the first place. The driver didn't even finish turning into the lot before he hesitated, because something was in her spot. Not just a car. The car. A navy Bentley, paint so polished it caught the setting sun and threw it back like it was spiting the sky. Clean. Parked perfectly. Nose out, grill gleaming like teeth. Dead center in the space she'd always claimed as hers. The space she once told the condo board she'd manifested after a vision board workshop. And standing next to it, with the calm of a man who knew exactly what he was doing, was Marcus. Black suit. Hands behind his back. Nothing about him rushed or confrontational. Just there. The driver looked over his shoulder. This the right place, ma'am? Janine leaned forward, squinting. The shift on her face was almost imperceptible at first, cocky confusion laced with the kind of privilege that assumes everything is a mix-up until proven otherwise. Yeah, she said. That's my spot. Probably someone new. But when she stepped out, the air hit her harder than expected. Not the heat. She was used to Florida's humidity, but something colder. Something in the way the car didn't belong, and yet looked like it owned the place. She pulled her suitcase out of the trunk, heels clicking, and walked straight toward Marcus. Excuse me, she said, loud enough for condo windows to hear. This is my spot. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't respond, just looked at her with the kind of serene expression that makes people question their own tone. She tried again, more force this time. I said, this is my. And then he handed her the envelope. No words. Just a smooth, deliberate reach into his breast pocket, the crisp white rectangle extended like a chess move made 3 turns ago. She hesitated, because people like Janine don't get handed things without explanation. They get compliments, drink menus, and shopping bags. Not silent envelopes from strangers parked in their life. She took it. Her fingers lingered on the flap. Marcus stepped back, just one step, then walked around to the driver's side of the Bentley and waited. Didn't start the engine. Didn't open the door. Just waited. Janine stood frozen for a beat too long. Then she tore the envelope open, not gently, not with curiosity, but with that nervous aggression that comes when you feel the story shifting away from you. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Typed. No letterhead. No signature. Just one sentence. You went on the cruise. I stayed on land. That was it. No threats. No legal jargon. No apology. Just a statement. Her lips moved as she read it a second time, then a third, like the repetition might unlock some hidden kindness in the tone. But there wasn't any. Her eyes darted to the Bentley again, then to the man who still hadn't driven off. And then, finally, to the condo, her condo. Except now, it looked different. Not physically, but something was wrong. She pulled her phone out. No missed calls. No texts. She tried mine. Straight to voicemail. Then our building manager. Same thing. Then Vanessa. Blocked. She looked up at the unit again. The blinds were drawn. Lights off. No welcome home energy. No warm familiarity. Just walls and silence. She dragged her suitcase forward, but her steps had changed. Slower now. Cautious. Because this wasn't her return. This was her discovery. Janine turned the key like she still believed the world was waiting on the other side of that door. That her plants would still be blooming on the sill, that her favorite candle would still be burning low, that life would continue to bend in her direction simply because she assumed it always had. The door creaked open. A wave of air met her, not stale, not musty, just sterile. Like the place had been vacuum sealed in her absence. Like someone had pressed pause. But it hadn't paused. It had ended. She stepped in, suitcase dragging across the entry tile, and for a moment, she didn't notice. She called out automatically, "Richard." Nothing. She rolled her eyes. Seriously. Then she really looked. The entry table? Gone. Not missing. Gone. The photo wall with the family portrait she arranged to look casual for her followers? Bare. Small faded outlines remained where the frames had once hung, like ghosts of a life already archived. She moved to the closet, her heels clicking louder now in the silence. She pulled the door, expecting rows of her color-coded shoes and that row of his suits she'd always pretended annoyed her. Empty. Every hanger swinging gently, like something had been removed just moments ago. The floor was spotless. The laundry basket gone. The shelf where she stored gift bags and holiday wrapping paper? Cleared. She rushed to the bedroom, flung open the second closet, hers. It was still there, but not how she left it. A few wire hangers remained. No bags. No scarves. No dresses. The jewelry case? Gone. The floor safe behind the shoe rack? Open. Not cracked or broken, open properly. The code she once claimed only she knew had been used. The door swung wide like a sneer. Nothing inside. Not the heirloom necklace. Not the cufflinks from their 20th anniversary. Not the emergency cash she kept rolled in a tea tin. Gone. She stumbled into the kitchen, breath shallow now. Opened a drawer. Cutlery still in place. But the wine drawer? Empty. No corkscrew. No bottle of Pinot she had left for a special night. The fridge held only filtered water and half a lemon. The microwave clock was blinking 12 o'clock. A reset. On the counter sat a single sheet of paper. No envelope this time. Just bold, black ink on plain printer stock. You went on the cruise. I left on land. Same sentence as before. But this one cut. She stood there, the note shaking in her hand, eyes darting like they could find something that would make this all temporary. A charger. A remote. A goddamn coffee mug. Anything. But the condo had become a showroom, neat, emotionless, vacant. She picked up her phone. Tried me again. Blocked. Tried Vanessa. Straight to voicemail. She texted. Call me. Where is everything? Is this some kind of joke? 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then nothing. She moved to the fridge to find the magnet notepad where we kept numbers, plumbers, dog sitter, handyman. One stood out. Michael, property manager. Below it, a local number. Property manager? We didn't have one. We owned the condo. She said it herself at parties, fully paid off. That line was practically her brand. She called the number. Michael speaking, said a warm, indifferent voice. Yes, hi, this is Janine, the owner at Unit 4C. Pause. Oh, Mrs. Stanton. Actually, the new leaseholder listed it as Vanessa Stanton. Are you authorized to be there? She didn't speak. Ma'am, I live here, she muttered. There was a long, polite pause. The kind people give you before pulling a rug out. Not according to the documents I have in front of me. You might want to get in touch with Miss Stanton directly. Or her legal rep. They're listed as your emergency contacts. He hung up. She stood in the middle of what was once her kitchen. In her vacation robe. Mascara still crusted under her eyes. And for the first time in years, Janine didn't know who she was. Or where she belonged. 2 days after the empty condo greeted her like a mausoleum, a thick cream-colored envelope arrived at Janine's new short-term rental forwarded, no return name, just a high-rise office suite address embossed on the corner. She opened it like it was an olive branch. Part of her still believed this was Richard's version of an apology, a formal, dramatic gesture that would end in some kind of theatrical reconciliation. Maybe flowers. Maybe a second chance to cry. She thought maybe he'd realized he overreacted, that she'd walk into some polished conference room and find him there with tired eyes and a speech about forgiveness and how nobody's perfect. She dressed like that's what she expected. Soft blouse. Slightly undone collar. Perfume he used to say reminded him of the old Janine, the pre-Facebook Janine. She practiced a few lines in the mirror. A touch of guilt. A little humility. Just enough vulnerability to hook the part of him that used to soften when she cried. But when she arrived at the glass-paneled office suite, the receptionist barely looked up, just gestured to a boardroom door and said, "They're expecting you." They? The door opened smoothly. Inside sat Richard. Not crumpled, not crushed, immaculate. Navy jacket, crisp shirt, cufflinks she hadn't seen in years. The ones Vanessa gave him for his last day at the company. To his left, Vanessa, poised, cold-eyed, hair pulled back in a style Janine had always said was too severe. To his right, a woman in a black suit, face unreadable, papers in front of her arranged like scalpels on a surgical tray. Janine stopped in the doorway. "Hi," she said, voice faltering for the first time in weeks. "I got your letter." No one stood. "Sit," Richard said, nodding to the only open chair. At the end of the table, like a job interview or a trial. She sat. Then the screen on the wall lit up. A video started to play. High definition. Crystal clear. Janine, on the cruise, wrapped in a white robe, holding a mimosa. Frank in the background, shirtless, flashing a peace sign. And then her voice, "Best week of my life. No more boring nights. No more rules." Laughter. Her laughter. Off screen, someone says something vulgar. She doesn't flinch. The clip ends. Silence. Janine looked from the screen to Richard. "That was private." "It was public," said the woman in the suit. "You tagged the cruise line and geolocated the post." Janine's face twitched. Richard slid a document toward her. She picked it up, expecting the word divorce to scream at her from the page. It didn't. Instead, the top read, "Asset Transfer Agreement. Post-infidelity allocation retroactive." She began to skim. Her throat tightened with every line. The Naples condo already reassigned to Vanessa. The Port Charlotte rental moved to an LLC under Richard's name alone. Every vehicle, every joint account, even the furniture she claimed as hers in the division talks that never happened, listed, itemized, and already moved or sold. I don't understand," she stammered. This can't be finalized." "It is," said the attorney. "You failed to contest the fiduciary amendment sent via certified mail last month. 10-day response window. No reply. Legally binding." She turned to Vanessa. "You knew about this?" Vanessa didn't blink. "I approved it." "Why would you?" "Because," Vanessa said, her voice cutting clean through the air, "you're not the only one who remembers Frank." Janine looked at Richard. He stared at her like a man watching a window close on a storm. "This isn't revenge," he said. "It's restoration. You spent years erasing the man who built the life you wasted. I just made sure you don't get to decorate the ashes." The lawyer stood. "You'll receive a formal summary within 3 business days. You'll also be contacted regarding relocation logistics. The rental lease expires in 20 days. Janine stood, shaky now. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "This is cruel." Vanessa looked at her with eyes that didn't blink. "No," she said. "This is what fair looks like after you spit in the face of someone who stayed." The room didn't move. Janine did. But the woman who walked out wasn't the one who strolled onto that cruise. That woman thought she could manipulate an ending. This one had just watched someone else write it for her, line by line. The sun had dipped low by the time Janine stepped out of the boardroom. Her blouse clung to her back with sweat that wasn't from the Florida heat. Her purse hung heavier now, not from weight, but from irrelevance. For the first time in years, she wasn't sure where to go next. There was no lunch reservation, no afternoon facial, no back pocket plan involving charm and leverage. She just stood there, blinking at the bright sidewalk like someone who'd missed a step on the stairs and realized the whole staircase was gone. Then she saw it. The Bentley. Same car. Same navy paint. Same mirror-smooth finish that made it look dipped in arrogance. Parked across the street, angled just enough to be unmistakable. Except this time, it wasn't Marcus behind the wheel. It was Vanessa. Sunglasses on. One hand casually resting on the steering wheel, elbow propped like she'd been driving it her whole life. And in a way, maybe she had been, just not from the front seat until now. Janine's breath caught. Vanessa didn't wave, didn't smirk, didn't even glance over. She just reached down, shifted the car into gear, and pulled away without a sound, leaving behind nothing but silence and the faint smell of leather and finality. That was the goodbye. Behind her, the office door clicked open one last time. Richard stepped out. No coat. Just shirt sleeves rolled up like a man done with the paperwork and already halfway into the next chapter. He didn't rush to catch up. Didn't hover. Just walked up beside her like two strangers waiting for separate taxis. She turned to him, finally finding her voice. "So that's it." He nodded once. "You said that cruise felt right." He reached into his breast pocket and handed her something. Not an envelope, not a document, a check. She looked down. Handwritten. Dated. Amount, $3,250. Memo. Final mortgage contribution refund. Her hand trembled. This is a joke. He tilted his head. No, this is accurate. That's what you paid toward the condo. Net. After I subtracted the nights you spent with Frank on my dime. She stared at it. At the numbers. At the cruel, meticulous arithmetic of it all. He stepped back. And don't worry, he added. That's pre-tax. Consider it my last act of generosity. Then he turned and walked away, not like a man storming off, but like someone who had arrived somewhere else. No raised voice. No parting insult. Just a nod, a refund, and a quiet exit. Janine stood there for a long time, check fluttering slightly in the breeze. She wasn't crying. Not yet. Because it takes a few minutes for the body to register that it's no longer part of the story. Only part of the receipt.